What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? Tonight, welcome everyone. You're watching SkepTalk on the line. It is February 17th, 2025, and the lines are open. If you have a question or you'd like to try to prove creationism, prove God, whatever you want to try to set your heart out to try to prove to a couple of atheists here, we would really love for you to call in, see if you could do that. The number is 720-619-2288 if you're calling from the U.S. or if you're calling from outside the U.S. Or just want to call in from the web. The link is down there in the description. So here with Erika, or the Gutsick Gibbon tonight. How you doing there, Erika?
Oh, I'm doing okay. I'm keeping my head up. I think many of us are feeling like we could be doing better. All things considered, with stuff's going on for those of us in the United States, we could be doing better from government employees to people in academia, which John and I embody both. We could be in a better mood, but we're here. We're fighting a good fight, and we're hoping to get some calls from people who want to make the case for some crazy stuff. Right? I want to hear you call in and tell me about ghosts. I want to hear about aliens. I want Bigfoot. More than anything, I want to hear about creationism. I want you to call in and tell me why the Earth is 6,000 years old. Okay, 6 to 10,000 years old. Or I want you to call in and tell me why you think evolution isn't responsible for modern biodiversity, including humans. All of the above. We're excited. John, I'll ask you the same question. How are you doing?
Just sort of same shit, different dang, this miserable existence right now in this administration. But just pretty much getting up every day wondering if I'm fired. That's the best way to live your life, right? Like, I feel like that's the true American dream.
That certainly embodies, it's the American dream insofar as it's a nightmare, and nightmares are technically dreams. So we're all sort of, we're all in the same boat with a lot of this stuff. Government employees are being obviously hit especially hard, but I struggle to think of a group of people that's not being hit in some way by the nefarious bullshit that's coming out of the administration right now. I was telling John before the show, as someone in academia, these NIH cuts, at first the freeze, but then the NIH cuts that are coming down the line. I mean, gosh, forget about receiving any grant. If you can't get, a grant for cancer research, for Alzheimer's research, for diabetes research on diabetes, you're not going to get a grant for paleontology or, astrobiology or physics or chemistry. Like, it's not a good time to be, I was going to say to be a researcher in the United States, but it's not a good time to be anybody in the United States right now. I guess unless you're a billionaire, it's a really good time to have billions of dollars, I think, in the USA. So, if you're not a billionaire, maybe you should get on that. I've been working on my portfolio myself. I'm getting close.
Yeah. So that's, I hate the fact that we have a government that's trying to show preferential treatment to billionaires and everything like that. But as far as the show's topic tonight goes, I haven't really been doing a lot of creationism stuff on my channel, which I really need to get back into. You get stuck in like sort of a tunnel vision kind of thing, and I'm locked into like one particular thing, and so like I usually can do like multiple different like verticals on my stuff. So I'm really interested in somebody trying to prove that God created us or something like that. Like I got a video coming out, I believe tomorrow, where somebody actually tried to say that Yahweh's name is imprinted in DNA. I don't know if you've heard this one argument, Erika, about how DNA has a sequence of I believe it's nucleotides that is like 10, 5, 6, 5 or something like that. And apparently, if you manipulate the Hebrew language and change all of the letters in the Hebrew language to numbers, then the 10, 5, 6, 5 or whatever, it spells out Yahweh. And also, Yahweh is just pronounced by breathing in and out, like apparently that's how you pronounce God's name.
That's very reminiscent to me of you maybe have heard this one too, but there was one on, I think it was one of the structures or like related to hemoglobin, but it was like it formed a cross, and it's not even really
Yes.
like a cross. It's just sort of vaguely X shaped. And people were like, we carry the proof in our blood, and it's kind of like, man, you guys can do better than that. I know you can. I know that you can make arguments that are better than a very common shape in biology being in biology. We got X's all in us. Their little chromosomes are all X's too, but nobody points out that one because it's not quite the cross-shaped X. So I'm hoping truly that we will get some calls in about creationism. I've been on a sort of deep dive lately with regard to the history of creationism and how all of this sort of came to be, the first iterations, the modern iterations, all that kind of stuff. And I found that it's like a surprisingly good argument against creationism as a whole, because it's recursive. It is the creationism today is in many ways the same creationism of 1807. Right, prior to the discovery of the ancient age of the earth, and prior to the discovery of evolution, obviously. Which it's interesting because it already has been beaten out over and over and over again. Every couple decades, we have the same sort of cage match where creationism comes back in a new form and tries to reassert itself, and we have to again have these same conversations. So if you're a creationist and you want to duke it out and make that case, call in. I'm super friendly. John's super friendly. We'd love to have the conversation with you and talk all about why your sort of creationist ideas probably aren't so different than those proposed by William Buckland over 100 years ago, over 150 years ago. Gosh, 200 years ago now.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any like novel arguments that could actually be made? Like by creationists, because I feel like, well, they're bringing things up from the 19th century or so, and I mean I feel like all of the anti-creationist and anti-intelligent design stuff that has been done. I mean, I feel like you literally just have to go to maybe a few websites and like all of the answers are just right there. And it frustrates me to no end when it's so easily refuted that, you could you just got to know which sites to go to, like the truly academic sites that list like, the evidence for it, explains it in simple terms and everything. Like Talk Origins is a really good one that I go to a lot. Talk Origins. And then there's the, I think isn't there a Berkeley site on evolution that does a pretty good job too? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, there is no excuse at this point in time, in my opinion, to be a creationist of any kind. Now you can be a sort of theistic evolutionist. I love the theistic evolution. They're just like, yeah, I accept all science, and their spirituality is sort of divorced from that. And as far as I'm concerned, the second, your spirituality is outside of the realm of science, it becomes something that is in and of itself untestable. I personally am not interested anymore, because it's like, okay, well, you're appealing to something that we have no means to investigate. So go off, King, believe whatever you want. That's none of my business until it starts to be my business politically, in which case then I have a problem with it again. But yeah, like as far as novel creationist arguments, I hear them, but they're novel in the sense that they're just derivations of something we've already done, right? So they'll try to create a new flood model, right? Which is cool, but the problem is we already know a flood of the global variety did not happen, right? So any type of flood model that you come up with that's new has to both explain, it has to be different enough that it's never been debunked before systematically. Flood models have been being debunked since Charles Lyell, right? But then you have to also, it has to explain what we see better than conventional science. It can't just be a new model in and of itself. To tango with modern science, it has to explain what we see in a better way. And as far as I can tell, you're not going to come up with a global flood that can explain desert formations, right? Which require arid conditions to form, right? Or you're not going to come up with a way to accelerate nuclear decay to explain the modern radiometric dates that we get without, as I so often like to repeat, vaporizing the granitic crust of the earth over 24 times over. It's just not going to happen. It's going to inevitably result in appealing to a miracle at one point or another, in which case we get to ding the I don't care anymore bell and move on our way. But maybe I'll be, corrected. Maybe someone can come in tonight and bring to the table a totally novel, a totally new creationist argument that has nothing to do with the creationism we've already seen a million times in its young, old, and intelligent design varieties, and I will be floored and convert on the spot. So I'm really hoping that that's going to happen. I've got my fingers crossed.
Yeah, me too. We do have a couple of calls that are queuing up, but they're not ready just yet. But I'm kind of curious, like when people do start to go to the route of like being a theistic evolutionist. The thing that I've noticed the most is that they then will go into more of like a I guess it's like, oh well, yeah, evolution happened, but God, it's either God guided it, in which is sort of an ad hoc sort of thing to tack on there with no proof for it, but then ultimately what it gets to is that God is necessary for nature. And I'm kind of curious, like, how would you respond to somebody that's like, well, without God, then nature wouldn't operate in the ways that it does? Like, well, how would you attack that particular line?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because we eventually boiled down to a fine-tuning argument. And I have had these conversations with theistic evolutionists in my life, and it sort of boils down to, in my opinion, they're making an argument from incredulity, right? It's an argument from complexity, it's an argument from incredulity, but at a universe scale instead of the intelligent design, which is like at the cellular level, where they're like, well, I just can't believe that something like this can come about, by itself. And, I think you can really refute a lot of those fine-tuning arguments with just that little puddle analogy, where it's like, yeah, things that seem fine-tuned come about all the time by natural processes. Things that seem irreducibly complex come about all the time by natural processes. We've observed this happening. And my favorite example is an ecosystem. So we've watched new ecosystems form. When volcanic islands emerge from the sea and they're barren, there's a period of time where they undergo primary succession, or like seeds will wash up, or they'll blow in, or little critters will fly, or animals that are at home in the water and on land will come and sort of colonize this island, and they'll start to form these interconnected relationships with one another. Like the bird will eat this type of seed on this new type of tree that's growing, or a specific type of lizard that's washed up on the shore will eat this type of bug that's been blown there on the wind. And these relationships over time build up as the ecosystem forms, again, before our very eyes, because we've watched this kind of thing happen, until you have a really complicated ecosystem with tons of different interlocking parts, the removal of any of which will collapse the ecosystem, right? It is, in its very essence, irreducibly complex. Any part being taken away would ruin the entire ecosystem. And yet we know that they form naturally, piecewise, over time, because we watched it happen, right? So who's to say that we're not looking at something similar, on a universe scale? And I'm not physics minded, but the way that I try to think of it is that it's like, if you have the event where multiple universes, whatever, exist, there could be countless ones where things weren't fine-tuned. It only can be appreciated as being fine-tuned if you have something to appreciate it, right? So it's the puddle, noticing that the hole that it's in seems to be perfectly made for it. But if there wasn't water in the hole, it wouldn't be a puddle, and it wouldn't feel fine-tuned. It would feel like a hole in the ground, jagged and imperfect. Water is shaped to fit the hole, not vice versa. So that's how I would respond to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good way to respond to it. I've just noticed that a lot of creationists out there, they just rely on sort of like this, this whole circular thing of they have to presuppose that God is necessary for everything. And it's like, you just can't crack that particular nut, it seems sometimes.
It's the presuppositionalist argument, right, John? Like it's the thing where it's like, well, if I presuppose that I'm right, if I presuppose that all of this requires, an ultimate force, and that force is like this personal agent, you know what I mean? Then yeah, if you presuppose you're right, you're right. I can't argue against that, and I won't, not anymore. It's a waste of time. But for those people who are eager in having this kind of conversation, like, we can talk about the nature of things, like, why is there something rather than nothing? And it gets really heady. And we're sort of working on the science behind that, to the extent that it's like, there are a lot of different models that explain the universe, and some of them have the universe as being eternal, and some of them start with the Big Bang, which is Big Bang cosmology is obviously far more popular. Some have the universe as recursive. Some have the universe as, with a definite endpoint. And I don't know enough about that topic to say which one, is most likely. I tend to go with the consensus, as we have to when we're non-experts in a subject. But it's like, I just don't find that to be convincing. It feels like a big argument from incredulity. It's like, I can't conceive of something as wonderful and magical as humans here on Earth coming about by anything other than a divine agent who is the master of the entire universe and wanted us specifically to be here doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find that convincing.
Yeah,
I don't know about you.
Same here. No, yeah, same here. I don't find it convincing whatsoever. But we do have our first caller, if you're ready. I'm a little confused as to what they're wanting to talk about, but maybe Wade can let us know what he wants to talk about. Hey there, Wade. How you doing?
Hey, yeah, this is Wade. I was just answering the question in the headline, can a theist prove theism, I guess, if you will? No, I don't believe they can.
Elaborate on that a little bit.
And I'm a theist.
Yeah, let's elaborate on that a little bit. So what exactly are you wanting to discuss? Because it seems like you want to discuss, the call screen that we have is a little bit different. It says that you want to discuss how theism can never prove evolution in particular wrong, which I tend to agree. But then what you've said here to us just now seems to be a little bit more in the vein of like, theism can never prove atheism wrong. What do you want to talk about?
No, no. In terms of the question on the headline, my understanding, it basically was like, hey, can a creationist, prove creationism? No, they can't. I don't think they can. That's kind of like my point. And I'm a creationist, if you will.
Okay, so you are a creationist. Why are
Correct.
you convinced of creationism then?
Well, that's where the faith. It's all faith. The Bible says that only just live by faith.
I'm sorry. I gotta interrupt real quick.
That's how it goes down. Sure.
No,
go ahead.
but I gotta interrupt here because it's not faith. like creationism, as far as like how we know this world came into existence, like how it developed over time, how we know that evolution is a real thing that happens, and how it's the best explanation for the diversity of life. These are not faith-based things. Like, you don't have to have faith about those things. There's
that's not faith at all.
Things.
No, you're 100%. That's not faith at all. The faith that I'm talking about is, obviously as a Christian, Jesus Christ, and that's, to just live by faith. But in terms of your creationist, and, there's a lot of deception in Christianity and religion, and there's a lot of religions. My whole thing is this, that I don't believe true Christianity is a religion. I believe it's a reality. And this is just my own faith. But I will say this, for instance, with the whole Trump thing and the derangement thereof in the majority of the Christian, they're so deceived, they're wrapped up in the religion that they're all in the religion. And it's religion. My whole thing is faith. Okay. It's a personal thing. And, it's a tough deal because at the end of the day, we're in a big trouble with this Trump thing, and people can't seem to figure out the riddle, if you will.
So I think we're, I will put myself out there and say we're probably on the same page with the Trump thing, but I'm more sort of interested in this idea of like creationism is about having faith. It's sort of like, despite all of what we see in science, which is a wonderful tool that was developed, at least in the West, primarily by Christians, to investigate God's creation. And the way that they sort of argued this is they were like, we should, if God made everything, we should find and be able to investigate God through the creation. And their argument was basically like, creation thus should not be deceptive. So what John and I were talking about earlier was this sort of where we sort of go hands off, or I was at least talking about where I go hands off in the conversation with folks who are religious, is like, if we can agree on all of the science, but then, they believe that there's a God behind it, we can have a philosophical conversation about that, but it's not going to be a scientific one. Creationism, on the other hand, is inherently a scientific conversation. And it's one that I think you can't make the argument for. And I think it's one that you can't make the argument for from science or even from scripture.
In terms of what you're saying, in my interpretation, I believe this earth is millions and millions of years old. And I think science and historical archaeology proves that fact. But it's unfortunate that the religious community, in terms of the Christian community, like the Trump derangement that they're under, they can't seem to get that riddle. And it's unfortunate, but this is how I see things. And, you know, I think that when I interpret the Bible, when I read it, I think it confirms the fact that it's millions of years old. And obviously science does also.
So I think that's awesome. I'm glad we're on the same page with that. How do you feel then about evolutionary theory? Since we're going down the creationism sort of, discussion here, what are your thoughts about evolution?
Well, I mean, evolution hasn't been proven, just like, if you will, the Bible hasn't been exactly proven. Because if you think about what is proof and what is proof, I think everybody can agree on proof.
Well, hold on.
If you look at it, and this is hypothetical, and I'll be quick. How many seconds do I get? 2 seconds, 3 seconds to finish, or no?
Well, I mean, you've already said. Well, hold on. So this is turning into a gish gallop. I don't want it to be a gish gallop. I want to handle particular statements. So first, you said evolution's not proven, and evolution has been proved as well as any scientific theory can be proved. So it's well supported by evidence.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so let me interpret what I'm saying. It hasn't been proven in so much that everybody's on board.
Does an ad populum
that I was making? Not
argument?
That it's been proven or this. I'm talking about on board. In other words, when something is proven, everybody's on board that it is a proven fact, and we can deal with facts. Facts are facts, and we got to stick with the facts. That's it. And if we get off the fact of the matter, we're going to be in a little bit of trouble. And we're in a position right now politically, and I'm not there.
Under that definition, though. No, it's okay. I wanted to add something to that, though, because I want to make sure that you feel like you're being heard, that we can have sort of a chat back and forth. But I do take issue with one thing that you said, which is this idea that if everybody agrees on it, it's a fact. We have no facts then, right? Because there are people out there who believe that the Earth is flat
100%.
right now.
That's why you can't prove it. That's why you can't prove it.
So then we can't prove anything.
You're without all the facts, and so therefore you're never going to prove it unless you had all of them, and you're never going to get them all. It's like me being a gold digger. My goal is to find all the gold in the world. That's all I'm going to know is about digging for gold.
Wait, hold on, Wade. What is a fact to you? Maybe we need to go back to basics here. Could you define what a fact is for us? Because I feel like we're talking about two different fucking things.
Okay, well, a fact to me is if I went digging for gold and I found a big old fat gold nugget, and there's a rumor going around, most people don't believe it. I believe it because I found it, and I know it's true. And then the people that witness it knows it's true. And so that's a fact to me.
I feel like that's not
believing.
I feel like that's not even
my whole thing is
consistent, right?
No, I don't even know how that. I don't know how that resolves as a fact. No, how is that a fact? That doesn't even. She's saying that what you're saying doesn't make sense as far as
I was trying to do an analogy. Look, it ain't a fact because it's not true. I was trying to do an analogy, and maybe that was a terrible, and I apologize if it is. I'm just trying to acknowledge, look. You search, you find, and then that individual that searches and finds, whatever truth that they find, that's their truth. And it's like if you search for truth or history or this or that, you got to search for it. It's like digging for gold.
So that's very
kind of the point or the analogy that I'm trying to say.
But the problem with that is
you prove that a fact that I found the biggest nugget in the town? No, you're never going to prove it.
So I think you can apply that to a lot of stuff.
If you tried to prove that one, you might be in big trouble.
Jesus Christ! I'm muting you, Wade. I'm sorry. You don't know how to listen when somebody is talking. Okay, you're muted right now. Go ahead, Erika.
Sorry, Wade. I just, I feel like we have to have a nice back and forth here, and I feel like it's fair to interrupt someone when you feel like they're sort of mischaracterizing something or something isn't clear, which is why I'm interrupting you. But I feel like your definition of a fact here could be applied to an opinion, meaning that I think what your definition of a fact is that it's an opinion, right? It's very postmodernist. You're like, well, everybody can have their truth, and there is no objective reality. But that's just not how our world operates. We all operate as humans as if there is a shared objective reality. We do it when we get on planes. We do it when we get in cars. We do it when we eat our food. We do it when we, look at the weather. There are things that we can all agree on. And generally speaking, those things that we agree on are rooted in science, because what science is it's a way of knowing. It's a way about, understanding the natural world around us and sort of using that to improve our lives. So in that case, I would say that your definition of a fact is not something that matches reality, right? It's just not something that works. Now we can have a conversation about like whether or not what you're saying sort of reflects a lot of people's perspective of a fact. But what I don't think we can do is move forward with that as an operative, agreed upon definition of a fact. John, are you on the same page with me on that?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
that's
I
totally
am.
fair.
Okay,
Absolutely,
so
that's totally fair.
maybe
And if the guys let me respond, and it won't take long, I would respond in this way: that I guess what I would say is, I really don't have the answers, and in terms of the science and all that kind of stuff. And you're right, but at the same time, I'll say this. People pick sides, the yellow team, the blue team, the red team, whatever team. And to try to get everybody to jump on the science side, and I get it, because the science in terms of what you guys are saying is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, in terms of the sentiment that you just gave me. It just kind of is like, wow, science, I guess I get eyed out. We live forever, take the chip, whatever it takes, and we live forever. And that's what the science says.
I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about right now. I'm lost. I feel like you're just on a stream of consciousness now.
I was being facetious. My bad. I was being facetious. I didn't mean
I
to
just
be
don't know
rude.
where
I'm
you were
sorry.
going with that. Like, you started talking about taking some kind of chip or something, and then therefore you're going to live forever. Like, I'm sorry, dude. I just don't know.
I apologize. I digress from that. I'm sorry. Man. I didn't look. I don't know how to. I don't. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like you're sort of painting John and I like we like worship science or something, and that it's, this is like the only way to know anything about the world. I can't speak for John, but I don't feel that way, right? Like things like philosophy, even though they're way over my head, or like talking about, having these conversations about religion, right? Like these are important conversations to have. They're just not within the purview of science. And I would argue that science is our greatest tool when it comes to improving the lives of people on this planet. And many people who are on the side of not science, as you sort of alluded, that there's being on the side of science and not being on the side of science, they don't actually live their lives like that, right? They live their lives in the comfort of a home heated by science, driving a car that was created by science, enjoying immunity from diseases that they got because of science. And it's like, then they choose arbitrarily to pick parts that they don't like and say, actually, like, I don't really like this idea of, not, being another type of animal on the planet. And so I'm going to reject that. That's sort of what I mean when I'm talking about science and consensus and how it applies to the lives that we lead here on the planet, right? It's like, it's not a religion, it's not a worldview, it's just a tool. And insofar as it is a tool, it's very, very difficult to whole cloth reject big chunks of it while using the rest of it to improve your life. So I reject the concept that someone can have their truth, and that truth is relative when you're including things like science. And I'm sort of assuming that no one here is a solipsist when I say that, but
That's fair. That's fair. No, that's totally fair. I totally get it. It's not. Look, man, I'm not a very smart guy, and I kind of have a probably a lower IQ, and it. But my whole thing is this: it's like there's those that are going to live by faith, and there's going to be those that have that blind faith. And, you know, there's those people that are going to, if you will, kind of been dumbed down. And,
I guess what falls flat for me there, Wade.
I think that's where the balance lies of, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that's where it kind of falls flat for me. I don't understand blind faith in things. I mean, I guess for in very, small instances, I guess blind faith, but like, as far as the context in which we're speaking in, I don't really understand blind faith. Like, why would you want to have blind faith when you could have actual evidential support for your position instead of just blindly believing whatever some kind of old book is going to tell you? And I mean, I don't understand why you think the Bible says that the earth is quote millions of years old or billions of years old. I don't see where you're getting that from. I also don't know how like God factors into your worldview as far as like the world being created and how God factors into evolution and all that kind of stuff. Like, I feel like there's a lot we could iron out in your theology there, because I don't know. I'm thoroughly confused where you're sitting at, because it just kind of seems like you're using faith, blind faith, as sort of like a filler for the gaps in your knowledge. And I guess I don't understand the appeal for doing that, other than instead of saying I don't know, you can now say, well, God. I mean, do you think that just saying, oh, well, God did it, is a sufficient answer?
Situational. Well, if I could respond just momentarily, it would be a situation to where it's my experience in my little short-term life, because time goes fast and all that. But in my experience, and in terms of the life lessons that I've lived, I've realized some things, and it's one of those deals, you know. And
what things have you realized?
Well, you know, I grew up in a way that is much different than the ordinary. And, you know, suppose, you know, you grow up in a way that, you know, you were born in a situation to where you're not going to be successful, and you're not going to be able to, if you will, you know, survive in terms of knowledge. You were dumbed down, and, you know, you made it through to where you could see some things that perhaps most people can't see. So, you know, you get kept out of a certain matrix, if you must. And,
Wait,
you know, you become one
like
with
the
nature.
Matrix?
Well, one with nature, and so much that if you look at nature, and I'll try to do it like this. You look at nature, you're with nature, you see nature's in harmony. It has a cycle. Well, humankind, they're kind of like not fitting in the picture. In terms of, you look at the earth, you look at the world, you look at the animals, you look at the harmony thereof, and then you look at mankind is the only species that I could see. I don't know if you could see it. I could see it. That humankind has a problem. I mean, and the problem is amongst each other. So think about it.
Wait. So wait, do you think other animals don't have problems inside their own species? I mean,
you don't
I'm
know
sure
what I mean
Erika
by harmony. You don't know what I mean by harmony.
I don't.
They do the same
I have no
thing
idea
year after year,
what you
decade
mean.
after decade. Humankind, they have ups and downs, don't they?
Ups and downs. I'm not sure what you're talking about here.
Wait, if I may, you know, this is kind of a heady conversation. I think, you know, we're sort of wanting to ground it in stuff that's rather concrete, and I feel like you've kind of got this perspective that, and I'll speak for myself, at least to me, is like it's much more philosophical, and you're kind of pulling in all of these, you know, observations that, you know, may or may not hold depending on what you're talking about. Like, are humans doing something that's fundamentally different than all other animals on the planet today? I would argue that we're doing something of a very extremely, you know, that's different in degree, but not in kind, not categorically different. Have other animals, you know, doomed themselves through time? Yes, we've seen this a lot of times. throughout history, just not in the same way that we see humans doing it. And we can have that kind of conversation, but I feel like what you're really getting at here is that it's like you're sort of alluding to this idea that, you know, humans are broken, humans are wrong, we're doing something odd, that the only explanation for is something with a supernatural element. And, you know, you said a couple of times that, like, oh, you know, you're not very educated, or you know, whatever, you think you're dumb. I don't think you're dumb. And I think that if you want to be educated on these kinds of topics, like whatever the age of the earth, or evolution, or, you know, human and other animal behavior, you know, you've got internet access, you've got all of that at your fingertips. And I bet you could dig really deep into it if you really want to. You know, you're the only one holding yourself back in that respect. But I feel like you're wanting to have this conversation that's kind of heady, that's kind of philosophical, and you're kind of pulling in these other elements that I don't know if you really want to dig into. Does that make sense? Because it only kind of did to me.
Absolutely. My main reason I called is I was just trying to answer you guys' headline. I love you guys' show. I've been here watching you guys for approximately 6 months. And, you know, I just want to answer the headline. I don't believe a theist can prove you guys wrong. I don't think they could do it. I don't think there's enough proof to be able to get you guys to prove you wrong. I think if it would already happen in my lifetime, you know.
Okay.
I feel like it would already been proven.
Well,
you know.
Well, we appreciate your call there, Wade. We do have a couple of other people to get to tonight, so I think we're going to go ahead and switch on over to them. Yep, no problem. Call in again in the future.
Thanks for watching the show and for calling in as well.
No, I'll continue, guys. Watch, you guys are great. Love you guys. You guys got a mind that is open. And it's refreshing because, you know, it's unfortunate, especially in the Christian community or the religious community or whatever you want to call it. Man, it's really closed-minded. And you're open-minded is definitely refreshing. And I really appreciate you guys for that.
I thank you for calling in, Wade. You know, I mean, I that's what we want, right? Is we want people, whether they agree with us or disagree with us, you know, if you want to have this kind of conversation, like, call in. That's the whole point of the show. So thank you so much for the kind words and for calling in. And hopefully you'll still continue to enjoy what we have to say, even if you disagree with us. So thank you, Wade.
See you, Wade.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Well, we do have some announcements to kind of get through here. We've got the Patreon. If you like the show, the SkepTalk, or any of these shows here on the line, which we'll go over here in a second, you can go to the patreon.com/call the line, and you can support us there over on Patreon. We'd love to see more people over there supporting us on Patreon. We also have the shows coming up next week. So sorry, let me get my I thought I had all of my stuff prepared. So tomorrow night we've got Chewed Gum with Alyssa and Eve, and then on Wednesday we've got The Hang Up with Matt and I believe that's Ian Harris, and then TACIS on Thursday at 2 p.m. with Arden and Luxander, and then it looks like we got a Cus I Wanna on the 22nd, which I think that's a Saturday night with Forrest and Austin. And then the Sunday show next week, we've got Matt, unknown guest there, but on the Sunday show after dark, we've got Forrest and Eric. So we've got a lot of great shows coming up this week, and can't wait to get to that. All right, you ready to get to the next caller, or do you get something?
I want to add something here. You know, if you like this show, if you're the kind of person that, you know, you listen to it while you're doing other stuff, that's usually how I consume YouTube content. So if you're just like cleaning your house and, you know, you got this on, or if you sit down and like do a dedicated watch, you know, or you hang out and chat, whatever, please don't forget to like the video, comment if you feel like it, and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this kind of stuff. Because I try to emphasize this on my own channel, but it's like, that's the free way to help the show. And it doesn't hurt you at all to just, you know, hit the little, like, do the little click and it helps suggest this to a lot more people. So if you're like, damn, I like the show, but I don't know if I like it enough to be a patron, you definitely, if you're here listening up till this point, you probably like it enough to hit the like button and leave a comment. And if you can't think of a comment to leave, I want you to tell me your favorite candy, because I'm eating Nerds gummy clusters right now. John, what's your favorite candy?
So typically I don't eat a lot of candy because my diabetes. But there are these great sugar-free Russell Stover candies. They've got like a peanut, like a Reese's cup type thing. That's pretty good, and stuff like that. And there's also like ice cream. I like ice cream, but it's the Carb Smart. It's a name brand Breyers kind of thing, Carb Smart deal that is pretty good, and it's got like pretty low net carb count. So I just got to be really conscious about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the kind of candy I eat is probably off limits. If you've got diabetes, it's pretty. I mean, you're basically eating like a ball of sugar with smaller balls of sugar around it. So, you gotta play safe with that kind of stuff. But I'm so glad that there are those options around. I didn't know that there were like Carb Smart ice creams.
Oh yeah, if you go to the ice cream section, it's like further down on the ice cream section, but there's like a whole section of like sugar free or Carb Smart, or like where it's sort of like I guess they call it keto, but it's just
right.
low carb ice cream. Sorry if y'all hear me hacking up tonight. I'm coming off of some COVID. So, that really sucked.
Not good.
But are you ready to get to our next caller?
Let's do it. Next call.
All right. We got Marijn. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. From the Netherlands. What's up there, Marijn?
Hello. It's
Marijn.
It's Marijn, but I don't blame you at all. I actually grew up in the U.S., so I'm very, very used to Anglophones having a lot of trouble with the Dutch I.
Ryan.
Okay.
Got it. Ryan.
I blame my Southern heritage for that.
No problem.
All right. So, what'd you want to talk about tonight?
So, first things first, Erika, as a fellow biologist, it is an absolute treat to watch you talk and just generally geek out over, well, everything genetics-wise, evolution-wise. The passion you have for this shines through so magnificently, and honestly, you are an honest-to-goodness role model in the field of biology.
Oh my goodness, that is so kind of you to say. Thank you so much. I mean, goodness, that's the whole point, right? Is that I'm trying to force other people to be as passionate about it as I am, because I love it so much. And
Exactly.
like to. You got to think back to like anybody who's had an experience in any school, in any class. It's like learning is so much more fun when the person who's teaching it to you is actually into it. Like I can think of so many times that I took a class and it was like pulling teeth for the professor to teach it. And it's like, gosh, why are you even here teaching it if you hate it so much? I mean, we know why, but it's like, I don't know. I am hoping, it is my deepest hope to get people interested in science, because it's like we live in a time of unprecedented access. And anything that I can do to make it even more accessible, I'm going to do it, because it makes me so glad, and it gives me such a massive dopamine hit to give it to other people, and have them be psyched and interested in it as well. So thank you very much for such wonderful compliments.
So actually, the subject I was going on today was more along those lines, and you should absolutely take it as an invitation to geek out some more. I was wondering about what your major Eureka moments were, and yours too, John. Like, can you remember any time where something about the mechanics of the world, the way things or people or biology or whatever works, where it suddenly clicked for you and you're like, oh shit, this makes sense and it is awesome.
So the most recent one for me was when I first started teaching biological anthropology at a university level, right? So I taught the labs for many years, and then I moved over into teaching the honors lecture, which is what I teach now. And that means we have to teach a lot of like history of science. So we have to teach like, okay, well, who came up with the idea of catastrophism, right? George Cuvier, like who was the one who challenged him? It's, Charles Lyell with uniformitarianism, like all that kind of stuff, like really basic level. You got to know a little bit of it. And I used to have such a disdain for history of science because I was like, I just want to learn about like what the people are actually like what they're doing, not what they said they were going to do. Like teach me about actual cell biology. I don't care what Robert Hooke had to say about it. But the more I've been teaching this subject, the more I've really come around to the idea that it's like by reading about the people who discovered it, you almost get a little like association high by reading about it. Like you discover it almost along with them. And the reason I say that is because when I was first reading on the origin of species, which I did a couple of years back, but I read excerpts of it before. It was getting to read.
The classics, eh?
Yeah, it was getting to read Charles Darwin go through his observations, right? So he makes all of these observations while he's on this voyage of the Beagle, and he's inspired by all these different people like, Thomas Malthus and all sorts of, biologists that had sort of preceded him. And he starts to make these observations. I was like, okay, all populations that exist of critters, it's like they're constrained. They can't get too big. It's like, that's intuitive. That makes sense. Populations can't get too large because if they get too large, there's not enough resources and then they suffer. And it's like, so that's observation number one. Okay, that makes sense. And then it's like, okay, well, some organisms, because they vary, are going to be better in a certain environment at getting the resources they need to survive than others. Oh my God, that totally makes sense. You can see that when you watch ants. You can see that when you look at mice. You can see that when you look at any animal that's ever existed. And that variation is inherent to everything. Everything varies at least a little bit. All kinds of critters, they vary due to genetic mechanisms, which Darwin didn't know at the time, but he did know that everything varied. So it's like, okay, there is variation and there is a struggle for existence. And I'm working through this and I'm like, almost like I'm discovering it along with him. And I'm like, okay, all of that makes sense. He goes on to say, okay, so we know that more organisms are born than survive. They've got this struggle for existence and they have this inherent variation. So the ones with the variation that gives them an edge wherever they're living are going to reproduce more often than their kin. They're just going to be better at it. And what is better and what is worse is going to change depending on the environment that they're in. And I was like, oh my God, and if that happens, then over time, the population is going to look more like the ones that are better fit for their environment. They're going to evolve. And I was like,
that makes sense.
You
can see the puzzle pieces sort of falling into place.
Yeah, you can see it fall in place within Darwin's brain, like while you're reading this. But then it's like, for me, I was like, oh my God, I knew evolution, right? It's change over time. It's the change in allelic frequency over time. But it's like putting all of the pieces together at such an intuitive level to me blew my mind. And then it was like all of this happened before the advent of genetics. And then it's like the concept too that really like was an aha moment for me was that it was like, okay, what's fit isn't consistent. What's fit in the Arctic is not fit in the Sahara. What's fit in the Sahara isn't fit in a temperate forest. What's fit in a temperate forest isn't fit at the bottom of the sea. And so there is no ultimate fitness. So we can't be evolving towards a goal. There just isn't an ultimate form of evolution because we're at the mercy of the environments in which we live. And it's like, it's a perfectly self-sustaining system in that way, like barring, plagues or asteroids that, smack into the surface of the earth or volcanism or whatever. Like, it's such a wonderful mechanism to keep populations in check and well suited to where they live. And I was like, it blew my mind. It truly was a sort of watershed moment for me. And that at least it was my most recent one, which I really liked.
That is a cool one. Yeah, with natural selection and all that. What I always say is I dislike the term survival of the fittest because it's so prone to misinterpretation and social Darwinism and all that. What I always say is survival of the fittest means if it works, it works. And if that sounds stupidly simple, because it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, Darwin hated social Darwinism, right? Like Herbert Spencer and all of these guys that proposed social Darwinism.
I can understand that.
Yeah, and it's like he was still alive when all of this was happening, and he was like, "I do not co-sign this." And even after he died, Huxley, spoke out against social Darwinism in general. Like they did not like that application, because the idea was that it's like, we're humans, we've been fighting against the constraints of on our species for so long. Why on earth, once we've gotten our societies where we're sort of free from the bounds of natural selection, at least as intense as it was when we were living on the savannas, it's like, why would we want to then turn around and apply that same force to people? Why would we want to do that on societies? We've sort of moved beyond that, was the idea. And so I was like, yeah, they hated social Darwinism, but it's like, yeah, the concept of it all, of natural selection, and reminding people that fittest just means, like, are you good within your given environment? Are you reproducing more than your peers? And then also remembering that when we're talking about this concept of evolution, it's always context specific. It was like finally stepping back and seeing the full picture, at least for me, in a way that I never had before. And Darwin, interestingly enough, wrote later in one of, I think it was in one of his correspondences, he was like, I wish I hadn't called it natural selection, because so many people were like, oh, selection, there's an agent, someone is driving it, someone is selecting for the things that they want. And so he, what he wanted to call it instead was like natural preservation, the preservation of certain characteristics as they filter through. I think it was natural preservation, as they filter through the environments in which they live. So I don't know. That was just so cool.
Terms.
Yeah, and it's phenomenal to see this. Like, you're reading the thoughts, you're watching somebody piece this together. Now almost 200 years ago, and it's like, that's such a uniquely human thing to do, I think, is to empathize with people through space and time. And it's like, you're watching him put it together and you're like, oh my gosh, he's getting it. And he gets so close to the modern ideas of genetics, and you're like, no, Darwin, that's not right. Please read the work of the Augustinian monk that everyone's ignoring. Please, he figured it out. But it's yeah. So that's it for me, John. What was your Eureka moment? What is a Eureka moment that you've had recently?
Well, I'm an engineer, so I don't do a lot of like direct work with, I guess, science in the same way. Mine's more along the lines of development stuff. So like, I have Eureka moments over, like, finally figuring out what's causing a bug or something like that. Like, oh, this is the reason why that thing is doing that thing. And so, like, there's that. I guess there's also Eureka moments that I have whenever I finally understand a certain design pattern and I understand how to implement it, and I think that I get it and everything like that. So, like, I guess I have little Eureka moments.
When you finally track down that rat bastard line of code that's been wrecking everything.
Yes, exactly. Like, oh, this is the exact place right here where everything's fucking up. And so, like, it's very fulfilling for me, and I get that same kind of rush, that you get with the Eureka stuff.
I definitely enjoy those moments too. If I may, one of my own, like the one I was thinking of when I gave you guys this prompt. This was a module I actually had in school. It was called Earth and Evolution, and it was a combination of biology, geology, and all that. And it basically outlined the interconnected relationship between the development of grasslands, global cooling over the past 50 million years, the evolution of horses and other large grazers, the evolution of phytoplankton, the evolution of whales. That they're all directly interconnected with each other.
And to throw a little monkey wrench in there, also hominins, right? So they're like the classic idea where it's like these grasslands, as the Miocene climatic optimum fails and you get the Volesian crisis, and these grasslands are popping up everywhere. It's like grasslands take over forests, and what do you have when you have an ape that's hanging from its arms? It's an upright ape in the trees. You take away the trees, you get an upright ape that's on the ground, and then you got an upright ape that's walking around with its hands freed up. And it's like that idea that these large-scale environmental changes just shock organisms into moving in these really odd directions is so exciting and cool. And there's nothing better than finding a new sort of clade of organisms, and then you're like, oh, I bet there's a great Wikipedia page on this, and then you like fall down the perissodactyl rabbit hole or whatever. It's so much fun. That sounds like a great Eureka moment.
Every now and then, yeah, it's this thing that really hits home how vastly interconnected everything in the world is, and like something I really like to emphasize a lot is that it's all interconnected in a way that makes sense. It's all entirely natural, you know, consequences of the initial situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Little
Right? Like,
little bits and pieces. A random occurrence here, an asteroid wiping out dominant reptiles there, and all of a sudden you get these multiple snowballing situations, and it makes perfect sense. I can't get over that.
It's really so wonderful to take a step back and like, sort of like what you did with this module and take a look at the big picture of it all, and truly see how it all does fit together, right? Like I was talking to a geologist friend of mine earlier today about the nature of speleothems, which are like stalactites and stalagmites. So they're like the buildup of calcium carbonate and other minerals inside caves. And it's like you can go to the northern and southern hemisphere and you can measure the amount of like oxygen, for example, like oxygen 18 versus oxygen 16 in these speleothems. And what's really cool is that these two things reflect the opposite depending on the hemisphere of the cave that you're looking at. So it's like you're looking at a northern hemisphere cave in China, and you're looking at the southern hemisphere cave in Brazil, and the oxygen 18 and 16 oscillate with each other in exactly the way that you would expect if the Earth was at a specific axial tilt as it goes through precession. Like it's the coolest thing to see. And like that kind of pattern doesn't come out of nothing.
You're telling me that you can basically have a record of how the Earth wobbled based on those oxygen?
Recorded in the stalactites and stalagmites of caves. And it's not just that, you're recording the monsoon seasons, right? Because like when monsoons are heavier, they leave a specific ratio of like oxygen 18 to oxygen 16. And when they're lighter, it's the opposite, right? Because it's more arid. So you can find these signals of the monsoons, which are directly related to the precession of the Earth, its wobble. And you can see these recorded in exactly opposing ways in the northern versus southern hemisphere in direct correlation with their location and where the Earth is in its precession. It's the coolest thing.
That is incredible.
It's really awesome. You look
that up sometime.
It's called the orbital monsoon hypothesis. There's a really wonderful free PDF of a chapter from a geology textbook that I used when I made a video on this like a way long time ago, but I was really talking about it today. It explains it, and it's got these wonderful graphs. You should check it out. It's really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for calling in and letting us, letting us sort of geek out about these kinds of subjects and for such a wonderful thought-provoking question.
Yeah, I worked in animal genetics for a while, but all things considered, now I might just go into biology teaching, which again,
you should
you're a role model for a reason.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. Yeah, you should absolutely do it. There is not a high on this earth that I have found that is as good as teaching a concept and seeing someone light up as they get it, and realize that like what you've been talking about has gotten through, and they're like, oh, and they think it's cool, and then they have more questions, and you're just like, oh my god, the imparting of knowledge, the human prerogative, it's the coolest thing.
It really is infectious. But
yeah, it's wonderful. Best of luck.
I'll leave you with this thing. Back in high school, I had a mathematics teacher, and I had the privilege of having him in his very final year of teaching. He retired at the end of that year, but you saw the constant sparkle in his eyes when he taught us. And at the end of having explained this particular mathematical principle or bit of algebra or whatever, he'd say, "People, isn't that fantastic?" completely unironically. And a lot of students couldn't be bothered to care, but a lot of us could, because that sort of that sort of enthusiasm, it's virulently infectious in the best sort of way. And
No,
I
I couldn't
see
agree
that
more.
exact same thing in you, in Forrest. And if I do get into teaching, I hope it's something I too will be able to display.
You sound very excited about, learning in general. So, I've never met you in person, but I certainly have the utmost confidence in you.
Thank you sincerely.
Thank
You
you for
guys
calling in.
have a fantastic rest of your evening, and good luck should some idiots show up. I
We're
have
hoping.
confidence
We
in
have
your
our
ability
fingers
to
crossed.
wrangle them.
We have our fingers
Yeah.
crossed. We're hoping they'll show up.
Yep,
Yeah.
we definitely do hope for that. Thank you so much for calling in. Really appreciate you. And I guess I hope that you'll call in the future. Sorry, I'm trying to get my brain right. Hope you have a great night or day, whatever that's like, wherever you're at. All right. So I do want to try to reach out to any theists in the chat there that's maybe talking some shit in there. Like if y'all are talking shit in the chat, about evolution or whether or not God exists or something like that, definitely call in. We'd like to hear from you. We still got about, I don't know, 30 minutes before we get a cap calls. So just go on ahead and call in and we'll try to get to you. We do have Aaliyah though on the line talk to us about evolution. Hey there, Aaliyah. How you doing?
Hi. Okay.
Hi, Aaliyah. Welcome.
Do you guys want some background, on the question? Because I know it's kind of weird.
No,
Sure.
Please give me your background.
Okay, so I'm a nursing student, and we were kind of talking about evolution and stuff in class. And one person brought up this really weird thing I never heard of before. It's about your feet and how they would evolve. How your pinky toe is kind of just it's like they said it was kind of useless at this point, and it would evolve fuse, your toes would fuse from wearing shoes and stuff after hundreds of years. So I was just wondering about that.
Okay.
No, that's a super fun
It
question.
was kind of a weird weird thing.
No, I think it's a great question. I mean, we're in a weird position in the modern era where a lot of things that are normally tempered by natural selection have relaxed a lot. So really classic example that I use with my students is that it's if you were to go back 100,000 years and look at a population of humans and you were to measure the pelvic inlet, right, to measure the width of the opening of the pelvis, you're probably going to find that for, people who get pregnant, it's going to be pretty wide, especially compared to the average today. Today, it's going to be all over the map. And the reason is because people who don't have very wide pelvic inlets can survive childbirth thanks to C-sections. So it's there isn't that constraint on, to be general, females, because it's you can survive childbirth with having narrow hips, right? You're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And actually it's been moving in that direction pretty much since the advent of medicine, which means, first of all, I'd try to say this to transphobes all the time. You travel forward in 100,000 years and look back, and you're going to have a hard time sexing someone on the basis of the pelvis, especially compared to the more ancient past. But in regard to your foot question, don't clip that. In regard to your foot question, classically, what your friend said is correct with regard to the difference between a shod or an unshod person. So people who are unshod are typically hunter-gatherers. They're people who walk around, they don't wear shoes all the time, and their toes tend to splay a lot more. So their toes will be sort of splayed out like that. That helps them grip the substrate a little bit better, especially if they live on terrain where they're moving up and down on a lot of rocks. Whereas if you look at the foot of somebody who wears shoes and has since they were kids, basically most of the people that are going to be watching this right now, if you look at your own feet, all your toes are going to be more or less in line, and they're going to be pretty tightly so, almost tapering inward. Because we wear shoes and our feet are trained to be sort of encapsulated the whole time. Now, that being said, if you were to fuse the toes, like if you were to do, space travel and have a generation of humans that do nothing but live, or I guess I would say hundreds of generations of humans that do nothing but live in zero gravity and they never move, they never walk around, and you were to let natural selection take effect instead of intervening with medicine, you would probably see the atrophy of legs and a change in the shape of our spine and relaxed impacts on things like the valgus or bicondylar angle of our knees. A ton of stuff would go by the wayside. But the problem is where we're at right now, we still use our feet and our toes exactly the way we did 300,000 plus years ago, which is to say we strike with our heel and we roll our weight through and then we toe off with that big toe. And it's important for those toes to be able to be separate from one another so that they can sort of interact with the substrate even when they're through our shoes. So it's like having those toes be separated is pretty important for the time being. But one thing that's pretty interesting is that it seems like in mammals, the nature of toes is kind of flexible, like it's pretty evolvable, for lack of a better term. Because there's this population of wolves that lives, I think it's British Columbia. It's somewhere up north. And their former range has been eaten into by human. So this population of wolves has had to move further and further towards the coast, which means they can't hunt their normal run-of-the-mill prey in the same way that they used to. Deer, little tiny critters like rabbits and whatever. So they've had to resort to spending more time in the water. And what's really cool about these wolves, they call them the sea wolves now, is that if you look at their paws are webbed. They've got webbed paws. A population of wolves in the modern day has evolved webbed paws because they're more efficient at hunting partially in the water with webbed paws. So it's like this kind of change can happen super quickly, and mammals in our post-crania are notoriously flexible. So it's like, could we have change in human feet related to some kind of activity? Yes, but only if you change the environment. As it is right now, we still need all of our little toes separate to be relatively efficient. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay. I heard what you said, and I totally understood. I just want to ask one last question.
Aaliyah, sorry, can you move
Sorry.
a little bit closer to your phone? Because you keep going in and out a little bit. I just want to make sure people can hear you.
Okay, does this sound a little bit better?
Yes,
yeah.
Much.
Okay, my bad. I don't want to be too close, so I'm not like spitting in your ear, basically.
You're totally good. You're totally good.
My other question was, okay, if that's true, right? And our feet are kind of tilting inward. Is that disadvantageous somehow? Like, do you think that could cause problems down the line if our feet continue to like go inward, I guess, in that way, like you said earlier? I'm not.
Yeah, I think it depends on our lifestyle, right? Because for now we've got great arch support. Our toes not being able to grip doesn't matter too much because we wear shoes that have little grippies on the bottom of them. But if we were to transport, into an apocalypse, let's say something horrible happens and, humans in 10,000 years are, running around without shoes again, yeah, you're going to have a slight disadvantage by having all of those toes be in line than you would if they were able to splay. Fortunately, the nature of bodies is that, they're pretty flexible. So Wolff's Law, for example, allows you to remodel bone in accordance with what you do. So if you look at you were talking about being in nursing. If you were to look at an X-ray of, the right arm of a right-handed tennis player versus my right arm and compare them to our both left arms, both of my arms are going to look the same. The bone density on my right and my left going to be identical because even though I'm right-handed, I don't spend all day hitting tennis balls and building up a lot more muscle on my right arm as compared to my left. But this tennis player is going to have a beefy, like really remodeled, strong right arm bone, right humerus, and radius and ulna as well, to accommodate the fact that they're putting a lot more stress on it. So, whether or not that's going to transfer to toes, like, I don't know. If I went tomorrow and never wore shoes again, would my toes naturally splay out a little bit, looking more like somebody who lived their whole life that way? I have no idea. But maybe.
Okay. Well, that was really my only question. I thought it was funny and kind of an interesting thing that got brought up in class. So.
I thought it was a super fun question. Thank you for asking it. Take care.
Thank you guys for answering.
Take care. Bye bye. Ooh, okay. I see our next call. Oh, John, you're muted. I think you're muted.
I said thanks, Aaliyah. I'd been talking and everything like that. Like, great.
I walked over to look at the calls, and then I was like, wow, John's being really quiet. He must be really thinking in depth about that foot question. Came back over, and you were just like yapping it up, quiet as a mouse.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, so the next couple of calls are still being screened right now. And I know that you definitely have a hard stop at 8, right?
I do, guys. I have a hard stop tonight. I've never had a hard stop on one of these shows, but I do have one this evening, which is unusual.
Yeah.
But, I'll make sure it'll never happen again. And I'll make it up to you by next time I'm on with Forrest. We'll go for, 100 hours. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds about right for like a Forest stream. So we do have a theist call, and I would like to get us a theist call before you got to go. So let's go ahead and get to Ben. Hey there, Ben. How you doing?
Hey, good. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Oh,
what you want to talk about?
Okay, great. Yeah, I had a question. I may not be like exactly who you'd normally think a theist is, because of course I believe in microevolution. I think we all do. That people in Alaska end up looking different than people elsewhere because of the climate. But what I wanted to discuss was non-organic material seems to be guided by a force like we would call entropy, just kind of random things hit each other. Whereas organic material or living material seems to have a different kind of force, which pushes it not randomly, but towards complexity. And ultimately, in the human person, towards even an ability to have consciousness. You follow me? You
totally follow you. Yeah, totally follow you. I have quite a few thoughts, but I want to hear the end of your. Sure. I want to hear the culmination before me and John start giving our opinions.
Absolutely. So I'm saying, if you call that force, there's not a thing. There's a force which goes on, which sort of pushes nature in that direction. If we call that God, then, and I know that doesn't mean necessarily that everything that we use, the Bible or anything like that, but if we call that God, then all of us would be theists, right?
All of us would be theists. I don't. I mean, I feel like you're playing with the definition of God, and I feel like you're reducing the idea of God down into something that it's not necessarily like representative of. Like I don't know. It just it seems like a weird definitional thing as far as like calling it God. Normally, when people talk about something as being God, what we're talking about is like some kind of entity that has some kind of intelligence that is, making conscious decisions to affect things in our reality in a certain way.
Right.
And so like, I would say typically that's probably what people mean if they're, talking about a God.
Okay. I mean, I have a master's degree in Catholic theology, and there's some nuance here. Like, for Catholics, we would talk about God as the ground of being, not a being among other beings, but like the ground of being itself. So I mean,
so that just sounds like presuppositional stuff to me.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is, if we'd start with just part one of that, would you both agree that there seems to be a different force acting on living things, which causes them to be organized, what you can call survival, right? It doesn't seem to be like non-organic things where they just seem to bounce around and follow sort of the laws of physics. You agree that there's a difference?
So Ben, I have a couple of thoughts here. John, is it okay if I give my couple thoughts? Okay, so here are my couple of thoughts. So first and foremost, there's a distinction that I have to make about something that you said earlier about accepting microevolution but not macroevolution. Microevolution is macroevolution. These two things are the same thing. The only difference between them is you're looking at a time frame. Right, so macroevolution is speciation, it's the formation of new species, whereas microevolution is change within a species. So if you accept any kind of speciation, even if you only think, that only new fruit flies can come out or whatever, you do accept that macroevolution is something that can happen. The logical sort of conclusion
Can I push
of
back
that
on that just a little bit?
Yes, you may, of course.
Okay, so I would make the distinction that microevolution is the variation within a genetic pool that is expressed in, let's say, a snow leopard looking different than a different, cat. Okay, but I think with macroevolution, you add the element of neo-Darwinian selection through genetic mutation, and that
Right,
I actually think has been disproven.
So you actually require those types of mechanisms. So we were talking about neo-Darwinism, right? I'm going to go ahead and say that we're talking about all of the mechanisms that act within evolution. So natural selection, gene flow, genetic drift, mutation. Mutation provides the new alleles. These others act upon that variation, whether it's new or extant, existing. When we're talking about the definition of micro and macroevolution, though, these aren't definitions that I've defined, right? These are the definitions. So it's not something that we can sort of quibble about. Like you can say, okay, well, I accept this amount of microevolution, but no more. I would sort of push back on that and say, we have observed both in real time, right? We've seen the formation of new species. We're watching some in progress right now in the case of ring species like the California salamanders. And we've also induced it in the lab when we're talking about things like reproductive isolation in fruit flies. That was a 1983 study or 1981. I can't remember which, but it was a reproductive isolation in fruit flies, which does follow the biological species concept. Now, macroevolution typically isn't even the problem that most creationists I talk to have. I dabble with creationists of all kinds. It's sort of my MO. And when I talk to creationists, generally the problem that they have is when speciation is occurring outside of the limits that one would intuitively accept. So they would say, for instance, that a snow leopard and another kind of cat, to use your example, that they're related. Those two things share an ancestry back to some kind of archetypal cat at some point. I agree. But I would push it further and say that that archetypal cat shares common ancestry with an archetypal dog or an archetypal bear or whatever as we move back in time, just as we see with the family tree. So creationists don't tend to have a problem with speciation or even macroevolution. The problem that they have is with common descent, that everything shares a common ancestor all the way back in time. Would that describe you?
Where you make a leap from a different type, like from a plant to an animal, or from a certain type of animal to an altogether different type of animal, that I think requires the mechanism of genetic mutation.
Well, hold on. Typically,
that I would say is
typically what creationists mean when they say microevolution is just adaptation. Adaptation is mutation. Like it can't. Well, it's not solely mutation, but like it can be like mutation. It can also be like epigenetics, but I mean that's kind of a different type of mutation going
Generally
on there.
An expression of the normal variations, like blue eyes, brown eyes. That's not genetic mutation.
So I would push back
Lighter
on that,
skin,
though, Ben,
darker skin.
I would say that we've seen the emergence of really phenomenal de novo, out of nothing, adaptive mutations. A one that I like to bring up, that I've been bringing up ad nauseum lately because it's such a striking example, is you have these two populations of fishes, right, that live in the North Atlantic. One population of fish can only go so far because the water gets too cold and their blood freezes, right? When the water is freezing and you have blood inside you, it runs the risk of freezing. But there is another population of fish, and it is the closest living relative of this fish species that can only go so far north. This northern fish is specifically called an ice fish, and it is unique from this southerly population of fish in that it has a single de novo protein that it has developed. It is a duplication. So you have this gene that's responsible for forming red blood cells in all of these different types of fishes. And in the southerly population of these two fish populations that I'm talking about, it does normal blood stuff. In the northerly population, that same gene has been duplicated. So they have two copies. And then the second copy has experienced a point mutation. So a single change in a single letter, right? That has given that new gene, that new chemical that is critical for forming red blood cells, the property of antifreeze. So this population of northerly ice fish that is, again, their closest relative doesn't have this, can now survive in an area because its blood is basically antifreeze, right? Chemically, it is, analogous to antifreeze. Now, this was a de novo mutation, right? So that means out of nothing. It means that you've gotten a duplication of a gene and then a point mutation that is neo-functionalized it. It's given it a new function. That is striking because that's not just existing variation. That is taking something that has existed and quite literally through the mechanism of mutation, creating something new.
Yeah, but it's a minor. Okay, so yeah, I mean,
No, okay.
I would say that
hold on.
the
Sorry.
Neanderthal. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess I was just going to bring up, like, there's so many examples in nature where, like, mutation is part of the adaptation aspect. I think Erika probably knows what group I'm talking about. It's a group of South Pacific Islanders that what they do is them. They are so used to, like, fishing. They dive down deep to fish. They have developed this adaptation, which is a mutation that allows them to stay underwater for longer periods of time so that they can hunt. And this is something that's, they've developed over long periods of time. And it's an adaptation that is a mutation. I mean, that's one thing. Another thing is in the lab, we've also been able to modify single genes that would be, like, sort of similar to how mutations operate in alligators, like gator scales and stuff like that. They end up turning into, like, sort of the first steps in developing feathers, like little needle-like feathers. They start developing into them. If you can recall, do crocodiles have feathers?
No.
Okay. Crocodiles don't have feathers. So, like, we make one genetic mutation, right, to their genes, and their scales turn into prehistoric feathers. So, like, when you talk about how microevolution is not these genetic mutations and these changes, I guess I just don't understand your concept of what differentiates macro from micro.
Sure. I admit there are genetic mutations, and most of them, I think you would agree, are lethal. But occasionally they can be beneficial. In rare occasions, they can be beneficial.
Well, sorry to interrupt. Let's recalibrate that a little bit. Most are just dud, I guess. They don't have an effect.
They're neutral.
The ones that, right. Yeah, and then out of the ones that do have an effect, I think most are not beneficial, and then there's a small segment that are beneficial.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm not here to say genetic mutation is not a thing. I absolutely think genetic mutation is a thing. I think that's non-controversial.
I understand.
But I think most of what let's say within the human, I don't have this kind of, like, new Earth theory, or I think you would agree it looks like humans came out of Africa, and maybe light skin allowed people who moved into Europe to whatever it is, like, have more sun absorption, more vitamin D. That's why within the natural variation of skin color, lighter skin at the time was more successful. I don't doubt any of those things. And there's also things like webbed fingers that are, I think, genetic mutations, which I don't think affected anyone's survival. But so I'm not disagreeing with any of those things. I would just say that there's a mathematical issue of whether a series of genetic mutations can occur that would cause, like, a leap from one type of thing, like from a plant to an animal, can you
So-
have a series of genetic mutations that all take place? It's just a math problem, and I think the answer is that mathematically it's not possible. But
Sure,
that's
but
actually not
the
my main
problem
point.
though,
But
so there are a couple of things here, right? And I'm going to loop them into what, I made a couple of notes on your main point there when you were first outlining your position, right? Animals don't come from plants. Plants don't come from animals. We share a common ancestor. Same lump fungi in there. Other different types of bacteria or archaea. Same situation, right? So you don't go from a plant to an animal or an animal to a plant. They both descend from something that was far more simplistic than both. But
Okay.
what John was talking about there, we can even do that with complex things like body plans, right? Like we can induce chickens to have fingers, right? We can induce the development of sort of proto forelimbs in fish. This is something that isn't that difficult, and it's done by not by adding any new genes, we're tweaking existing genes. Because the sort of tetrapod homologous pattern of limb bones and the nature of how we build our bodies, it's shared genetically. It's highly conserved amongst all tetrapods, and in and of itself is just a few changes, major changes, of course, genetically, but they're mostly changes in expression and duration from what we see in sarcopterygian fish, like very simple sarcopterygian fish like lungfish or whatever. But that leads me to a problem that I sort of just exemplified myself, which is calling them simple. Because this complexifying force that you're talking about, that's not a totally new idea. There have been scientists who have proposed in the past, usually around the post-Enlightenment, with around Darwin's time, give or take 30 years, that the reason organisms change to become more complex over time is because of the hand of God, right? Like there's an influence of God here. He's sort of driving the complexity in organisms. But the problem with this is not all organisms move in a more complex direction. Complexity isn't necessarily a good thing, and in fact, sometimes being simpler is better, especially in environments that fluctuate relatively quickly. And this is the reason why life has existed on Earth for, from a conventional time scale, at least 3.8 billion with a B years. But complex life doesn't show up until 550 million years ago. Like stuff was simple for a very, very long time because it worked. So it doesn't seem like there's necessarily this complexifying force that does exist. And then the last thing I'll say that you sort of mentioned earlier that I want to touch on is the idea that humans have this consciousness. We've evolved this consciousness. I'm a very firm believer that whatever the consciousness that exists in humans that makes us aware, I think it exists in other organisms. I don't think that it exists to the same level as we see in humans. Our level of self-awareness is quite extreme in the sense that we're able to empathize, like I said earlier, through space and time and with things that don't even exist. But certainly, we see versions of this that are pretty dang close. In other apes, we see them in proboscideans. So elephants will bury their dead and then avoid the pathways that cross over where their dead's been buried. We see them mourn and react when they hear the calls of their dead loved ones. We see complicated behaviors in whales and dolphins. Cetaceans who selectively teach their kids based off of the skills that they know they'll need later. So they'll teach certain skills to their daughters and certain skills to their sons. So it's like, to me, all of the arguments that you sort of made, and I don't know what perspective you're coming from, whether you're like sort of a theistic evolutionist that believes that God is necessary to complexify these organisms over time, or whether you're sort of a classic creationist. But to me, this feels like appealing to something that isn't necessary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, if your language there about animals, as distinguished from humans, the traditional language there from a Catholic perspective would be that animals have souls, but that humans have eternal souls, the image of God, or something like that. But I think we would agree there's something about them that's similar. So we use the same term, soul. Again, like, I don't disagree with that. It may be just different types of language. But what I'm getting at is, why would, if in general the laws of physics control things, why would there be this different force with animate plants and animals that seems oriented towards, I'm not saying complexity in every case, but you would say evolution is generally from simple to complex. And also from, like, just, human life, or any life, but human life develops from very simple organism to something very complex.
Can we?
You don't see that outside of living things.
No,
Go ahead.
no. Sorry. can we define what you mean by complex here? Because I guess I just don't understand exactly what, when you say that it's complex, like, what do you mean?
Well, I would say a human being is much more complex than, I think Erika was saying, we evolved from bacteria. Those are more simple, right? I think we intuitively understand the difference.
Well, sure. I mean, I would say that, humans are more complex than bacteria, but I mean, we're multicellular, and I believe bacteria is primarily single cellular. So, I mean, like, our cells could be comparable, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, like, do you think that we are more complex, like, in our workings than, like, other apes?
I think there's more complexity in how our brains, our brains.
So
are more
you don't
developed.
see them as just.
That's true.
Well, I mean, they're more developed, but I don't think that necessarily means that they're less complex, at least in the way that they work, like the way that our neurochemicals work and all this other stuff. Like, I don't think that there's much. I mean, I'm not a zoologist or a primatologist, so I mean, I can't tell you if there's like a major chemical difference in how a chimp's brain works versus like human brains. But
if you look at the product of human thinking, it's obviously way more. A city is way more complex than a group of chimpanzees, whatever that's called. It's obviously much more complex.
So just because this is sort of in my wheelhouse, the similarities between humans and chimps have been noticed since like Tyson in the 1700s, like the late 1700s, but 1700s nonetheless. You can see the extent that Linnaeus put humans and apes together, other apes together, and anthropomorphized like this single group of sort of man-like critters. So what John said is correct. We have all of the same brain regions. We have all of the same anatomy and neurochemistry. It works the same in humans and chimps. It works the same in most mammals, right? But what makes humans sort of different is this cultural, the accumulation of cultural knowledge that has been happening over time. But if you were to look at a human group 300,000 years ago and compare them to a chimpanzee group living today, there would be a difference, but it would not seem nearly as stark as it seems now with the technology that we use. The reason is because humans accumulate knowledge. Hominins in general seem to have been doing this, but Homo sapiens, for whatever reason, and people seem to be pointing to transkylase like 2, which is this interesting little mutation that like really increased the amount of neurons or the organization of our neurons. I can't remember the exact details. It was pretty interesting deal that Neanderthals and archaic Homo sapiens don't seem to have. But it's like you have this pretty big change that happens that leads humans to the innovation or our capability for innovation today. But it seems to me like that difference is not one of kind, it's one of degree, right? So fundamentally, the kinds of things that we do where we make tools and we grieve and we joke around and we politic and we fight with each other and we love each other and all that kind of stuff, other apes do that. We just do it to a different degree. And that's partially owing to the fact that we're the last hominins left. If we had other hominins to compare us to that were still alive, it also wouldn't seem nearly as stark. But I guess
I agree with you that there are many similarities, and I would say there's a distinction, but that's actually not my point. But like others will make a point, of course, that there are faculties that humans have that no other animal has. But that's actually not my point. Here, my point was about the force, which is different, like that appears to be different in living things than in non-living things.
So when you say that, right, and this is an important little bit, right? There was this question. There is still a question because you don't prove anything in science, but it's like there was this question. It's like, okay, well, how do you get life from non-life, right? From an abiogenesis perspective, how could you ever go to something complex from what chemicals typically do, which is reach a more stable state and call it a day? And Jeremy England famously argued that the reason is because by going through this step of being temporarily more complex, you actually end up increasing entropy in the long run. And I'm not a biochemist, so I don't know the details of that argument. But it seems to have made a decent case that it's like, okay, well, you can have this physics-based, this chemistry-based, reason as to why you would go through the step of being temporarily complex. And if you go through that stage of being temporarily complex, then from a physical perspective, that stays. And you can sort of get this complexifying force, as it were, over time through natural selection, because sometimes being more complicated gives you an edge in environment, right? So the second that you've got any type of natural selection going on, you're off to the races. And England provided that initial step.
A rock doesn't care. There's no natural selection where a rock says, like, I want to survive, right? It just bounces around.
Right. Because they don't reproduce.
There's no force. Right.
Right. They don't
What I'm
reproduce.
saying is,
But I would say that when you were mentioning earlier that there's no levels of complexity in rocks, I don't think that's true, right? Like we have levels of complexity in inanimate objects all the time. We have vast cave systems. We have the beautiful lattices of crystals. We have, suns as compared to a single atom, right? Like there's clearly levels of complexity here. And those levels of complexity are reached in inorganic material by those elements, those chemicals trying to reach a more stable state. And the idea is that in organic chemistry, when you're looking at critters and the chemistry that precedes critters from showing up in the first place, you're looking at something that's relatively similar. It just goes through a step where being more complicated actually does end up increasing the entropy and is simultaneously more stable. And I could not dream of giving you the details of that because I'm not smart enough to know biochemistry.
Sure, I don't disagree with you that I didn't say that that inorganic material couldn't be complex, but I can see how you might have read me as saying that. But I'm just saying there's a different type of force at work altogether in living materials, which seems oriented towards survival.
Why?
It just seems fundamentally and obviously different than inorganic materials, which don't seem to have this drive towards surviving. A rock, I don't think any of us would say a rock cares whether it's split in two or split in a million or becomes part of. Whereas with life, we could call it life, the force of life. Or if you want to call it evolution, the force of evolution, it seems to be directing things towards surviving and thriving and reproducing and all that stuff. And we agree with that. But I'm just saying, if you label that force,
sure, if you want to call, you could do the same with the laws of physics. You could say that the laws of physics are constant and that yields certain results that we see and forms the natural world, here and to the stars. And you could call that God. And, if you want to do that, who am I to stop you? I don't find it to be nearly as sort of ordered perhaps as you do. But in that sense, right, when we're talking about this difference between being dead and being alive, being abiotic or being biotic, a rock doesn't care if it's split in two. Totally true. Rocks don't reproduce, right? For something to be alive and therefore for evolution to act on it, for it to, want, quote unquote, to survive, it has to meet the criteria for life, right? Of which there, I believe it's like 8 or 9 characters. But some stuff occupies some of those characteristics and not all of them. Is a virus alive? Does a virus have this complexifying force? Because we certainly have many complex viruses, despite the fact that it doesn't meet all the criteria for being alive. So we have these living, quote unquote, transitional steps between abiotic and biotic as well, which is weird and I don't think should exist if we've got this singular force.
I agree. Viruses are in that little weird space, but
I think that you would also have to. Well, I was just going to say that I think that you would also have to differentiate your whole force idea from just the instinct to survive. Like, as far as living organisms go, living organisms, they survive. Like, that's one. If you had to point out like one transcendent goal, like of living organisms, I would say that it's survival. And so, like, this force that you're talking about is literally. Right. It's literally just, these organisms surviving. And that's what's causing the change. Like, if these organisms aren't going to survive, then they're going to have to change to adapt to the environment. Not that it's like a conscious change, but it's a change over long periods of time through adaptation.
Sure. Yeah. But I'm just saying, why does a rock not want to survive and grass wants to survive? I'm not saying
a rock is not conscious. Grass is not conscious. Like where you're
Right,
you're
exactly.
doing
That's
a
exactly my
false
point.
analogy. No.
Right,
But
right.
I'm
Grass
saying
is
that
not
it
conscious,
doesn't matter
and
to
yet
your
it
point.
seems to want to survive.
No,
You know what I mean?
no. I'm saying
How
that
would you
it
explain
doesn't
that?
matter to your point because it's a false analogy. You can't compare non-conscious items to conscious items and be like, well, why does the conscious things want to stay conscious? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I
I'm
don't
not saying
know.
grass
Are
is
you?
conscious, but yet it seems to act as if it wants to survive and reproduce,
It does want
right?
to survive and reproduce in the
Unlike a
sense that
rock.
all living things and some things that aren't totally living want to reproduce, right? Like it's this entire concept of the selfish gene. It's like you want to reproduce what you are.
Yeah,
That's what living things do. And they have the mechanisms, they have the machinery to actually do it. A rock couldn't reproduce even if it wanted to, even if it was alive.
right,
It lacks the machinery, which is, where viruses come
right,
in. But yeah, I think my sticking
right.
point with all this, Ben, is just that it's like I don't know. I'd be curious to like pick your brain as to see like where you lie on the sort of classic creationist scale, because you said some stuff here that reminds me of the classic sort of Catholic theistic evolutionist perspective, a God guided tinkerer or whatever, or at least a force put into place. But then some of that stuff about macro versus micro evolution that you said at the beginning sort of reminds me more of like a classical creationist perspective. The long and short of it, I think,
Mm,
for me, is that I think they're appealing to a complexifying force where there doesn't need to be one. This idea of a complexifying force did exist. There were, naturalists and then biologists who proposed it, basically up to 1905, 1910, something like that. But
hmm
once genetics was sort of unzipped by, I think it's Thomas Morgan and the likes of him, and we started seeing how they actually, like, how the cellular machinery actually works and changes over time.
hmm
Talking about the example of the badger, we're talking about the example of the ice fish, right? Um, it's not
hmm
necessary to appeal to it unless it's this ethereal thing that can't be investigated by science in general, which, if that's the case,
mm.
who am I to speak to it at all? Does that make sense where I'm coming from?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess it's something that is assumed. Um, I don't know how it would be investigated from the point of view of natural sciences. It's just assumed that life wants to, even when it's not conscious. There seems to be a force that wants it to thrive, unlike inorganic material.
But
And
that's like
I would just say,
ascribing
if you call that God, then you're a
That's like
theist.
ascribing a want to gravity, though, right? Like that's like saying, okay, when you have an immense mass, these particles want to be together, right? They want to clinch together
Mm,
and stay, and they don't want to break free. It's like if, in the
yeah,
sense that you want to say gravity is divine, that perhaps there's a
yeah,
similarly divine force at work in biology. If you want to say that,
yeah,
brother, that's your prerogative. But to me, I don't see a
yeah.
necessity to appeal to that.
Well, and as far as that goes, I look at nature more as it's a constant movement towards an equilibrium, whether that's entropy, working to an equilibrium where there's no work being done, kind of thing, or if there's like equilibrium in an ecosystem. And so, like, once an
hmm
ecosystem has reached that equilibrium point, like, I mean, sure, organisms inside that ecosystem are still trying to survive, but they've kind of struck this balance of, survival and non-survival of, different organisms like within the system. Like, I
Sure,
guess what I'm trying to
sure,
say
yeah.
is like, in the system, there's equal parts survival and not survival of certain entities within the ecosystem. It's just like it's kind of like in an equilibrium state. So like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah. I agree.
know. Maybe that doesn't make sense to like what you're trying to lay down here, but it seems to me like you want there, not that you want there, like you're manufacturing it or something like that, but it just kind of
hmm
seems like this force that you keep talking about is sort of like, I don't mean to be derogatory, but it's this magical aspect to reality that you think
Mm,
is there that's causing organisms to change to survive. But I really think that it's
mm.
just the nature of consciousness itself, this need to survive, this instinct to survive and everything.
What you imputing consciousness to grass?
No, but I don't think that grass has an instinct to survive. I think grass just grows.
You don't think it does? It
I,
does, right? I mean, it
no,
does, not like a rock. It has an instinct. In
I
other words,
mean,
not a conscious.
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't have a central nervous system that would necessitate the need for like a consciousness, like a necessitate a need
Right.
for like, instinct and stuff, I guess, in that kind of
What's going on
way.
in-
So I mean,
What's
that's
going on in plants? Yeah, what's going on in plants is quite different from what we see in animals versus fungi, even, right? Like we know that when you mow your lawn, that really nice grass smell that you smell is actually a warning signal that that grass can pick up on. That it's like, oh, we're being damaged.
Mm.
We're being damaged. Everybody get ready.
Right.
We need to start regrowing because we're being damaged. So it's like, we're
Mm.
anthropomorphizing it and saying that it's a warning signal, and we're anthropomorphizing and saying
Of
that it
course.
wants to do this or it wants to do that. But grass is composed of cells, and cells have DNA and genes, and those do want to reproduce. They in the same way that
Yeah.
a chemical element wants to become more stable, genes want to replicate
Yeah.
themselves. Now, I don't know
Yeah.
what you want to call that desire, whatever. Like I don't think that it's I don't think it should be framed that way. But in the same way that we call natural selection instead of natural preservation, we do it in a way that I think makes it easier for us to understand. So it's like I don't know. Plants are
Yeah.
doing something different as compared to fungus and animals, but I still don't think that you're looking at this force there. At least not something that's going to be investigatable by natural science. And I think we agree on that, right? Like earlier, you sort of seem to agree with the fact that it's like, wait, if there is this force, maybe
Yeah, I
we
mean,
can't investigate
it
it with
depends.
science, right?
If I don't think scientists have the foggiest idea of what life is, natural scientists or anyone else, and I don't think theologians have any idea what it is either. In its essence, life itself. We can talk about how it works, but I don't think theology has a proposal as to what it
Well, life,
is.
yeah, life
But
from a
so I agree.
perspective
I
of
don't
like,
think.
why is there stuff here? Why, you could talk about abiogenesis, and then it's like, well, okay, how do you get those organic chemicals? And you can talk about the origin of that, and eventually you're going to run into a
Yeah.
block. If you move far enough back in time, is why is there something rather than nothing? And I give
Right.
that
Exactly.
to the astrophysicists, and I give it to the philosophers because it's sort of outside of my wheelhouse.
Sure.
But if you want to put the reason for life, like what life is, into sort of this intangible, non-investigatable box, and say that it sort of falls under the same category as that other stuff, I will again say more power to you, but it's outside of
Yeah.
what I feel like I can use,
Yeah,
the
I
tools
agree.
that I feel like I can use in the world.
I'm just saying you could use the language. Like you must know, like the ancients looked at the movement of the planets and they found a harmony that they ascribed to. They thought was divine, right? And I'm not saying it's like in that sense that each planet has its own. But as a theist, I would say, yeah, that all the harmony in the universe is, an expression of the ground of being and the complexity of organisms. I think most scientists would say it's beautiful. That the complexity of a leaf is kind of beautiful, not just it is, but like that it's kind of beautiful, amazing, wonderful. And so,
yeah, but you understand that
without
that's very
saying what the
subjective determination, right?
I think we as humans
Like,
look at nature and say it's beautiful. I don't think that's
right,
controversial.
but what I'm trying to,
And
I guess what I'm trying to implore or talk about here is the fact that finding them beautiful, finding them like awe-inspiring or whatever, those are very subjective things. Like those are personal experiences for you. That doesn't make it an objective fact that this is like a beautiful complexity.
I mean, I do think it's the common experience of humanity, and I think that's objective. But I understand like a particular mountain may be more or less beautiful to different people or whatever. I understand that. But I would say that, I don't know. I mean, I would love to see creation. I'm not really a creationist. I don't think in the sense of young earth and any of that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying that it used to be that the church was really the birthplace. The Catholic Church was the birthplace of the natural sciences and universities, and there shouldn't be a conflict between the two. And I understand there is for lots of historical reasons, but I don't think that on religion side it should be telling scientists to pigeonhole their results so it works with the Bible. But I also don't think that scientists should say that if we define God as, let's say, that force, That therefore, like, no, we have answered this question definitively, that there is no, personal force in the
Ben,
universe that's creative.
I will be the first person to tell you this as somebody who is in science. Science is not doing that. There's nobody who is taken seriously in the scientific community who is looking to say science proves there is no God, right? Like, that's not the purview of science, right? Like, science isn't interested in
That's
supernatural
right.
questions. That's not the point. So it's like, it's not the
But there are
job of science.
but there are many people who do that nonetheless.
Sure, but they're not doing it from a scientific perspective. Like, I've never encountered anybody who's a serious scientist ever who has said, my science proves there's no God. In fact, I study human evolution, and I have people in my department who are Christian. I have people who are Jewish. I have people who are Buddhist, right? Like, they come from different perspectives. They make it work. And it's like, so I agree with you in that sense, right? Like, I'll be the first person to say, theology is really
Would you
none of
say that in
science.
popular culture,
Theology
in
steps
popular
into
culture,
science.
there is a stereotype that I agree with you. I
There
agree.
is.
Real scientists
is.
are not doing that, but there is a Richard Dawkins type who is
Sure.
like seen
And
as
Richard Dawkins
from
has
the
had-
perspective of
yeah,
science, making a
Richard
philosophical
Dawkins has
judgment.
done some cool stuff for evolutionary biology, and he's also said some really dumb stuff. And I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. But
No, I agree.
what you're talking about is true, right? Like, there's natural theology was the birthplace of a lot of the natural sciences, at least in the West. Now, we tend to ignore the fact that there were other places that science was at work and that came at it from different perspectives. But in the West, we agree that is the case, and I don't think you're gonna have a problem with that. At least you're not going to have a problem with that with me, certainly, like saying that these two things can be harmonious. My problem comes when people try to say science, like they say the opposite. Science proves the Bible, right? Or science indicates that there is a God, or science points towards a God, because I don't think it does that either. I think it is kind of not, that's not its purview. That's not its magisterium. It's not interested in that kind of question. And that means,
I agree.
that's why I go toe to toe with. Yeah, and that's why I fight with creationists all the time, because they like to say that science proves this or science proves that when it demonstrably doesn't. But we can add that conversation
well, it might
about
sometimes prove something. It might, but it shouldn't be trying to prove or disprove something. It's just trying to explore something.
Well, yeah, I mean, science,
You know what I mean?
Demonstrably, it is not science. Science can't prove anything, right? By its very nature, it is provisional. So, technically, we could find a ton of data tomorrow that better explains whatever gravity is doing than gravity, right? And science would have to change its mind, and that's, in my opinion, its greatest strength. But I think we sort of hit an impasse here, not in a bad way, but I think we're sort of just coming at this from different angles, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and
let me
Erika
give you
does
one
have
example.
to go here
I know that. But, sure.
Well, I'm gonna let you wrap up. We do need to get to super chats and stuff. So, but I was just gonna let you wrap up.
I was just saying, like Noah's Ark. I think they found shells way up high in mountains, and people said, "Oh, it's proof that there was a worldwide flood." And then that was later explained in a way that I think didn't hold up to this kind of worldwide flood idea. I'm just saying, science gave us the original evidence and then actually contradicted this. So I don't think maybe science will figure something out in the future, but I agree.
Ben,
really wonderful talking with both of you. And I
really need you to call back next time I'm on SkepTalk, because I really want to talk to you about the Noah's Ark stuff that you just alluded to. Because I have stuff to say about that. Call back next time I'm on. I'd love to chat with you more about this. And thank you for the fun call.
Love to. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Good night.
Bye-bye.
All right. See you, Ben. All right. I know that we really need to get to these super chats. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Because I know you gotta head on out real quick. So whenever we can get the super chat started, I know we got kind of a lot to get through.
I said 8 because I knew we were gonna have like a bumper, so I've got 10 minutes probably after that. 8, 10, we gotta get through the super chat.
Okay. All right.
What do we got?
We kind of we jumped out of there kind of quick. Okay. Oh, there we go. All right.
Let's do it.
Let me move my camera. Sorry, I had my little preview screen there. Let's start off with $20 from Regato. Regato says, I started as a math major but failed algebra because I could not do exponents. As an atheist, I have a problem with the concept of a higher power. So I got a degree in Romance languages and now I'm a cuddling. That's smooth.
It's already starting. I can see it's already starting. You're spared because you have a kitty as your PFP. And there's a cat for this profile pic too, which is good because I'm seeing another dog shit pun here. $5 from Secular Felinist. Poop jokes aren't my favorite, but they're a solid number 2. Poo jokes for Erika. They think this is funny, John, because last time they started, I hate the puns. I think they're the laziest form of comedy, and we get so many of them as super chats here. And they started doing poop-related ones last time. Doo-doo ones. John, I couldn't take it. It was too much for me.
Oh yeah. Oh man. I'm a dad, so like I love the dad jokes, which are primarily puns.
I know they are.
All right, Nick. Yeah, you're like, I am fully aware. You won't get any dad jokes from me though. So $5 from Coffee Mom who says, I have an essay to write this week and I need inspiration. What's your favorite example of artwork that was made by any species of Homo?
Look at the hash marks that were created on a shell by Homo erectus. It's the oldest example of art, quote unquote, and I think that it's a really fun example because you look at it and you're like, this isn't art. This is someone who made a bunch of, a hominin, Homo erectus, who took a shell and scratched a bunch of lines into another shell. That's not an example of art. And I think that's funny because art doesn't really have like a definition. Like who's to say that wasn't art by Homo erectus? Or who's to say that it wasn't just sitting there because it was bored and decided to make a bunch of hash marks with one shell on another shell, which is arguably even more familiar, being bored and deciding to screw around with a bunch of stuff that's by your hands and feet. So look that one up. It's really cool.
I feel like if art can be just a banana taped to a wall with some duct tape, I feel like, anything can be art.
People are really quick to cast shade on like hominin art. Like they'll look at, some smear marks on a wall and they'll be like, hey, I could do better. And it's like, okay, well then do it then. then do it then. Do better. Because I've seen worse stuff than this in museums. And I'm not an art critic. Maybe I'm too stupid to appreciate some modern art, but let's not throw stones in glass houses.
Yeah, and I'm not an art critic either. I took one art class in college, and that was like, 12 years ago or more. Anyways, all right, next super chat. I believe this one's you there, Erika. Oh no, God. You want me to read it?
No, I'll read it, but there's you guys are really lucky that all of these have cats in the PFPs, and I think this one has more than one cat. $5 from Jamnick06. It's Jamnick, of course. What did you get when you mix castor oil with holy water? A religious... See, this one's about poop too. This is literally about a BM. Like we're getting puns, and they're about having a bowel movement. Yeah, Syphilis did start it this time, but you guys all feed into it like a bunch of lemmings. Fortunately, I check the chat sometimes and I see some people are like, Erika's right, solidarity, puns are the laziest form of humor. It's the poor man's wordplay, and that's the only hope that I have for the next generation.
Next is $10 from Soupy Dude, who says, hey Erika, loved the video yesterday. The evolution of anthropomorphic traits like tool use, complex language, and religion is one of my favorite aspects of primatology and paleoanthropology.
Thank you, Soupy Dude. I'm so glad to hear that because my videos where I sit down and talk about papers, they never do very well, right? Because people like to, they want to see blood sports. They want to see someone get up and tell you why the creationists are dumb, which I love to do and will do all the time. But I got to mix in some of my other passion projects in there. So I'm glad you enjoyed that. And I will, as a fun little side note, my mother also watched that video. And you know what her biggest critique was? John, you know what it is? She said She said I should consider taking the Demon Days poster in the back because it was giving the creationists too much ammunition. And I was like, what? It's problem. She was like, they're going to think that you're a demon if you do that. And I was like, I don't think they're going to think that. But, incidentally, that has very rarely happened where someone will be like, Gutsick Gibbon, you can't trust her. She literally has a poster that says Demon Days on it. It's like, well, educate yourself because Gorillaz is a phenomenal band. $5 from Jamnico6. I ate 4 cans of alphabet soup yesterday. Then today, I had probably the biggest vowel movement ever. Movement jokes for Monday. You're going to run out of these. Like there's only so many shit jokes that you can make, and other people are going to see that, and they're going to be just as happy as unhappy rather as I am.
$10 from the Raven 200. I love DC Comics. Love of talking apes and their stories. Enter secret societies of talking gorillas, chimps, etc. If I were a non-human talking ape, I'd want to avoid people too. Can Erika relate?
Constantly. I'm in a constant quest to become more Gibbon-like in my day-to-day life. And that doesn't just include, like hanging from a hanging bar. It's also like holding up in my house and staying exclusively around my my pair-bonded mate. So it's like, I sympathize. I truly do. I forget who said it, but there's like a famous quote that it's like, orangutans are indeed very smart. They just act the way they do because they don't want to pay taxes. And it's like, yeah, they might have the code cracked. Because here we are dealing with all of our bullshit, and most of the orangutans they're big chillin'. They're having a great time being orangutans in the trees. They have their struggles, but none of the struggles are taxes, which is just an interesting thing that I like to note. And yes, DC has a wonderful ability to make so many gorilla and chimpanzee-based characters that I just don't see Marvel rising to meet that challenge. I don't see them doing that. And probably the MCU would be saved if they did more of that, I think.
Probably. Yeah. And I envy you in being able to work from home. I'm being forced in. They're forcing me to go back into work starting this Friday. Like, not even at the beginning of the week. Like, I have to, it's like, come back on Friday. Like, that pisses me off so much. Anyways.
I heard someone say that they should do that they should force the feds back to work because it isn't fair. And I was like, what? Fair to who? I thought this was free market capitalism. Companies should start offering, like, they should meet the competition level, the demand, if you will, and start offering work from home. But if it makes you feel any better, we're supposed to get. You're also in the South, so you've probably been seeing this. We're getting a big snowstorm tomorrow. So I might have to go in and teach, but class might be canceled. I don't know yet, and I won't find out until the university decides at the last minute, probably after I've already parked.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems stemming from forcing all federal workers back into the office, but we can talk about that on a different show, I guess. Maybe I don't want to spend all the time that you have left here complaining about my job. Next up, $5 from Jamnico6. Which part of a trilogy is always a stinker? The turd part. Poop joke trilogy. Is this the 4th one from him, or is this the 3rd one?
No, he does this all the time. He literally does this all the time. And the thing is that this joke only works if you use the word stinker. Which part is always a stinker? If you were like, which part of the movie is always bad? It wouldn't work, right? Because these jokes are hanging on by a thread. All of them are. Puns in general are. I can't believe we as a society tolerate them as much as we already do. And look, see, he's back again. $5 from Jamnico6. Out of respect for Erika, I was going to avoid poop jokes tonight. But when you gotta go, you gotta go. That's not true. You exclusively show up to bring these when I am here. I will kill you with a gun.
See, $4.99 from Big Doty, who says Wade is sitting in his mother's chair, legs crossed in one of her robes and slippers, twirling the landline cord with his fingers. I can picture that, but I did hear him open up a door, and it sounded like there was somebody else in there. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
I heard coughing at one point too that wasn't him, and I was like, is he just doing this in the room with someone else? Like, that's bold. $10 from the Raven 200. Yeah, the Raven also does this. Jamnik and the Raven, they're big fans of this. One plant says to the other, "Are you hungry?" The other replies, "I could use a light snack." Hi, Erika. A parasite walks into the You don't get two. You don't get two in one. You can have one of those. You may
Sorry,
have
you have to read it.
one. Okay. All right.
I'll read
I'm
the
doing
other
this.
one.
Yeah. Let John read it. Yeah.
Okay. The other one says a parasite walks into a bar and is told, "Get out." The parasite says, "You're a bad host." At least they weren't poop ones, right?
That's literally like what the last one when the username had Dodie, and I thought, oh, it's duty, and that's part of the joke. Like that was my instinctual reaction because I'm so traumatized by these super chats. Like, yeah, this one comparatively isn't bad. You're right. Like it turns out when things are, and I was gonna say shitty, but I'm not saying that because that would make it a pun. When things are bad, when they're compared with something that is worse, they seem less bad. That's where I'm at with these right now.
Yeah.
Fined from SJL, a Canadian woman was fined illegally for importing bull semen. In the U.S., bull semen is sold legally under the name White Claw. Sorry, that is actually maybe worse than the puns. I almost wore a T-shirt today that said "Claw in Order," right? Because I'm such a White Claw fan. Now, would I consider myself like a shooter on the streets for White Claw? No, I'm not going to fight their battles for them. But I do know that you must hate fun and must hate float trips, because if you can show me a better drink to eat to have on the river, I haven't seen it.
I like whiskey myself, so. But you can't drink whiskey like you drink a White Claw, I guess.
And you can't have whiskey on the river
apples and oranges.
Like, you're down on the river once.
Yeah. Let's see, $5 from the Raven 200. My favorite candy purely for nostalgic reasons is Milky Way. My grandpa always had them around the house whenever my siblings and I visited him. Rip. In my younger days, in my pre-diabetes days, my great grandparents, they would always keep have you ever heard of Butterfinger BBs?
Yes, and they've gone extinct, haven't they?
Yeah, they used to always have a bag of those, and that was the worst thing that they could keep because I love those things so much. But yeah, whenever I need like a pick me up on my sugar, peanut M&Ms are the ones I reach for.
Ooh, I love a peanut M&M. I really do. I've got NGCs by me right now, though. Little nerd gummy cluster. $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. What's the difference between the United States and a cup of yogurt? After 400 years, one of them can grow a culture. Welcome to the downfall, folks. I'm torn on this because it's a pun, but it's also shit talking the United States, which I've been very happy with those types of jokes lately. So I'm gonna go ahead and say it's a wash.
Yeah, I'll refrain from saying the very political thing I was about to say concerning the United States. $9 from Jeremy, who says, I agree with crap. I know I'm not going to pronounce it right. Marijn? Did I say that right? No.
I think it's Marijn.
Okay. Erika and Forrest have got me contemplating going back to school to become one of them. I think, anybody that's considering going to school, I totally agree. You should at least explore that if you can.
It is absolutely wonderful. If you go back to school, best of luck. Pick a subject that you love, and then take a bunch of courses that make you uncomfortable, and you will come out with a very well-rounded experience and be better off for it. $5 from Maud, Yale Science. True plus cosine plus love it. Well done.
$9.99 from Kate. Hey, Erika, I'm catching up on Neil's book, Your Inner Fish. Watch all your awesome channel, catching up on long forbidden knowledge of evolution. I read On the Origin of Species in college. Onward. Awesome.
Kate, you should read Some Assembly Required if you like Shubin's style, because it's also by him, and it takes a closer look at a lot of the body plan stuff that I felt like Inner Fish did really well. So you would really like it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see. I got the
that's
Darwin.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and the sketch of evolution.
Oh, I love it. I love that.
Tree.
It's such a human moment by him. It's one of my favorites. $5 from Jam Nick 06. Hershey's Kisses, Tootsie Rolls, and melted Snickers bars. Sounds like a poop joke, not a poop joke, and not a pun. Your best super chat so far.
All right, next, $10 from the Raven 200. But for real, Erika, I love your knowledge and enthusiasm for science. It's great to see. I freaking love animal science. Also, why are eagles often found in churches? Because they're birds of prey. Oh my god. Y'all are
That one's
so
also
mean
a
to
wash.
Erika with these puns.
No, literally, John, it's every time. It's every time. I think Jimmy has me on because I must be some kind of cash cow for super chats because they super chat just to piss me off, just to make me mad. And it you know you can have the impacts from rage that can actually last in you for more than just the immediate. Like there's lasting impacts when you get mad often. You're shortening my lives, all of you. Thank you for the compliments. But you know, the joke, not so much. I'm not $5 from Jim Nico 6.
You want me to?
Why the toilet roll down the hill to get to the bottom? Poop jokes are not beneath me. Yes, seemingly nothing is. Seemingly you'll go to any lengths. Any lengths.
It's $5 from Zurith Moonpaw. It says, so would I be asking you two for my robot monkey pet butler friend to love and hang with and upgrade with lasers? I mean, I'll put lasers on anything.
Yes. The answer is yes. $5 from Bryce Barnett 3D. Erika, do you have a VR headset? I converted the Mind Adapted into stereoscopic 3D for you as a Christmas gift last year. Want to make sure you can see it. Oh my goodness, no, I don't have a, well, actually, I think we have a Quest 2, an older VR headset that my husband had from a while back. But oh my gosh, I would love to see that, and thank you so much. Surely I emailed, did you email me about it? Email me again, and I'll send you a very flowery thank you, because that's amazing.
$4.99 from Sarah Talks Podcast, who says, Erika makes me feel so uneducated sometimes, lol, but I love her.
Do not think that. It turns out I'm actually very stupid. I just know I'm smart enough to talk about things that I know about publicly.
And I mean, yeah, and for me, I mean, I know they were talking about you, but I know I've felt uneducated a lot of times, but it's really just a matter of like, oh, I don't know this thing. Maybe I should, read up on it, buy a book or something like that. Like I've done that with a number of subjects and have come out on the other side, like, decently educated on it. So like, it's just, I don't know. I take those moments as like a sign of, oh, this is something that I can do to improve myself. And, I kind of do what I do.
Get excited, learn even more. It's an incredible opportunity, and one that I find myself taking all the time because, part of getting smarter is recognizing how ignorant you are, and I am very ignorant. So it's looking at it in a different light, it presents an opportunity. $10 from Storage Teacher Noah. Watch your Creationist museum video. Oh, the one with the cicadas. I remember those. They messed up my circadian rhythm. Thank you for everyone you folks do. You were so close. I was about to be nostalgic about that video, but just in the final hour, we just botched it. Thank you, anyways.
Yeah, $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. If God is the ground of being, what kind of ground are we talking? Clay, soil? Does God have beauty bark or lava rocks? Or are we going au natural? I think that God would be kind of like a mixture of every single thing, and it would be one of the, those AI videos where they like constantly are morphing into different things. That's how I envision God. So Monkey at Typewriter envision God as if he's constantly morphing in and out of all of that stuff.
It's like a Tesseract rock.
Yeah.
$5 from JamNick06. Erika has a hard stop. I'd recommend something like, this is a joke about stalkers and DMs. Amazing. That one is a little bit on me because I set you up for that. But if I had known you were going to be here tonight, I would not have done that. I would have phrased very differently.
Yeah, Nick is always here.
Yeah. $10 from Band Geek Math Freak, who says, do you have or see any value in ritual? I'm trans and a non-theistic Satanist, and I use some ritual in my HRT routine. I know it doesn't do anything material, but I get some catharsis from it.
from a cultural anthropology perspective, a lot of stuff can be ritual. It doesn't have to have a spiritual basis to it, and ritual makes us feel good sometimes. It's routine, it's comfort, it's fun. So yeah, I think that it serves the value that it provides you.
Yeah, and I would say that anything that, like, if you're doing it for you and you're not, like, shit talking other people because they don't do it the way that you do it, I mean, you do you. Like, I genuinely, like, even for religious people that have their own, like, religious stuff, like, as long as it doesn't affect me and you're not hurting yourself or other people in the process, I don't really give a fuck what you do. So, like, you do you is kind of my position on all that.
Okay, we got $5 from SJL. Rocks can evolve by breaking up, forming a conglomerate, and becoming pudding stone. Quite true. And love seeing that puppy. Love seeing that PFP puppy picture.
$5 from Monkey Head Typewriter. Ben, it seems like things want to seem to have intentions, and the seeming is evidence of God. Get it? Bro needs to review 9th grade earth science.
$5 from Monkey Head Typewriter. Definition of horticulture: you can lead a horticulture, but you can't make them drink. Also, why isn't there a synonym for thesaurus? Much love to you. This isn't as bad as most. Because I feel like this is more wordplay than pun.
Yeah.
But it feels like it was made with malice, though, if that makes sense.
See, $5 from Zurith Moonpaw. You just lost the game, Erika.
I lose it every time I'm on this show. Every time I'm on the show, I lose the game, and every time I'm on the show, I get stomach ulcers. It is as certain as death and taxes. $20 from Godfrey and Good. Thank you very much. Aloha. Do all scientific experiment conclusions need to be repeatable? What is the work around what is the work around if finding can't be repeated in the exact same way? Mahalo. Hopefully in a study design, you're taking into account replicability. It doesn't necessarily need to be easily replicable because some experiments are, expensive and there's a lot of barriers to entry equipment wise, but it needs to be theoretically repeatable. And then ideally people go forth and do repeat it. Observations, on the other hand, obviously you can't choose how many observations you're going to make. And if you observe a rare phenomena, you're going to hope that you can observe it again or somebody else can, but there's some things that are outside of your control. Thank you.
$10 from One-Eyed Heathen, who says, here's another shitty joke. Also a serious question. Are humans the only animal that tells stories?
It's a really good question. I don't think we know the answer to that. Like we certainly see communication and what sort of minutia and little idiosyncrasies are being translated in the communication of like great apes or whales or proboscideans is tough to discern. So I'm not really sure. I think we can certainly say within the human language, where like human languages were the only ones that do that. But the way humans speak isn't the only way that communication happens. So I'm going to say I don't know if we even can know the answer to that yet.
Yeah, I would ask for clarification on stories there, because is it like telling stories as far as like fictional stories, or if it's just like telling somebody what happened? Because I could see other apes like being able to communicate. Oh, this bad thing happened, and like that in a sense can be a story kind of thing. So it really depends on what you mean by stories.
Elephants and whales, and yes, exactly. $5.
Oh, sorry.
No, this one's yours. You take it. I already see what it says. This one's on you.
Corey Springer. What's with the cat profile pictures always doing this? Where do cavemen poop? In Neanderthal.
I think it's because cats are naturally mischievous, and so people that associate themselves with cats sort of pick up on that and decide to just make my life harder in a way that only a cat could do. Awful stuff. $5 from Eric Smith. A photon checks in at the airport and asks any bags to check. To which the photon replies, no thanks, I'm traveling light. I really regret letting people know that I hate puns so much, because they're the easiest kind of joke to make. They'll never run out. And even if they did, they would just repeat them because they would know that it upsets me so greatly.
Yeah.
I will hunt you all down.
I
I'm
have
not-
a whole card deck. I have a whole card deck of dad jokes that I should probably bring up here next time I'm on with you.
Knowing that, I will not host.
Okay,
This is our
I'm joking then.
This is our last time appearing together.
$5 from Space Barbarian. Nobody has a rational argument for return to office except for commercial real estate owners, and theirs is selfish. Yeah, so that's the whole thing. If they're really wanting to be efficient in the government and they're wanting to save the government money, which they're not actually wanting to do, then they wouldn't have everybody come back in, because what they're going to have to do is buy buildings. But at the same time, the Muskrat is also cutting off leases that weren't being used because everybody was on telework. So the situation that they've created is that they're forcing everybody to come back in, and then they're actually like giving up all of the space that we already had. And so everybody's going to be cramped shoulder to shoulder, like in every single building. And so it's this grand plan to make working for the government so unbearable that everybody just quits.
That sounds right. $5 from Aaliyah Shauna Silverbow. Today I had a kid's meal at McDonald's. His mother was furious with me.
Ate a kid's meal.
I got it, Morgan. I got it. Make no mistake, it resonated.
$5 from Austin Sims.
Oh, this is you.
Yeah. Erika, did you know the mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell? Apparently, Dr. Dan loves it when people mention that, so I figure you'd like it too.
You know what, Austin? When I was teaching the other day, when we were doing cell biology, which is one of the first things we do in Unit 1 of every semester, I said, all right, everybody, organelles, they're like little organs for the cells. They each do specific jobs. Like, for instance, the mitochondria is, and then the entire class went, the powerhouse of the cell. I didn't teach them that. They just knew it. It's the only good news about, some modern science literacy is everybody does know what the mitochondria does. Thank God. $5 from Zurich Moonpaw. Sasquatch often gets mistaken for Bigfoot. Yeti doesn't mind.
Got it.
I will admit that the hashtag on that is good. That's all you'll get from me.
$10 Canadian from Jessica Gallagher. When I was a Christian 20-ish years ago, I never allowed myself to entertain the possibility of evolution being real. My dad would always say, a monkey can't just decide to be human. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that's an old, William Jennings Bryan style strategy that, by the way, Kent Hovind stole, but we'll get to that later. $5 from Maud. Erika's like a woman riding through a sewer in a glass-bottom boat. She's in this shit, but she's clearly above it. I know that you're talking to the people on the show, but I'm interpreting this as talking about people making puns like yourself, who I'm currently looking at through the bottom of my glass bottom boat for this specific super chat.
$5 from the Raven 200. Jimmy, go take a stone cold stunner and a rock bottom. What did the cell say when he ran into the table? Ouch, mitosis. You're welcome, Erika.
So the idea is supposed to be that it's like my toe hurts, right? Like, oh, my toe, because I ran into the table. So where's the cis coming from then? The Raven 200? What's the complete version of this pun? I ask you. $5 from Ryan Hall. Some alligators can grow up to 15 feet, but most only have 4. I feel like that one's less bad because it's not explicitly a pun. It's more of like you thought I meant this, but I actually meant that. But I still hate it.
Sorry, it just caught up. I'm back now.
$5 Australian from Darren McAuliffe. How's Erika like Jabba the Hutt? Because I eat a lot. And I eat 1 time a day, and I eat a ton. Oh, because I'm a wonderful human being?
Yeah,
Jabba is not a wonderful human being.
No, do you remember? I think that's episode 4 or episode 6? Han Solo says to Jabba the Hutt, "You're a wonderful human being," and he's not a human being. So it's like,
yeah,
a shit talk.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. Well, I'm choosing to interpret this the way I interpret it.
Yeah, no, I think you're a wonderful human being. So, I mean,
$5 for monkey typewriter. What's the difference between alligators and crocs? One will catch you later, and the other will see you in a while. Last one. Glad Erika came in tonight. You were okay till the end. You were okay till the came in one, because that's a classic adage. Like, I could have just interpreted that as like, oh, he's being silly, but then it turned into an attack, which I recognize. Thank you for the $5.
$5 from Jamnick06. Not everyone has an appreciation for poop jokes. I guess it's probably a fecal matter.
That one doesn't even make sense. Explain this to me, John.
I don't know. I just,
because it'd be like, oh, it's personal preference. What does that have to do with literally shit? Like, it's just more doo doo, like fecal matter. What does that? Where are we trying to say? What's the pun? What's the joke?
I don't know. I laugh because if a fecal matter, I don't know. I just laugh at these jokes. I'm sorry.
I don't know why you do it. I don't know why you encourage them. $5 from secular feelness. Why did one fly say to the other? Is this still taken again? Another poop joke, because flies sit on shit, I guess. There's an unlimited supply. $5
from Jamnick06. What? Why
it's
did
literally intentionally a repeat. We did this one already, but he knew that we did this. It's literally repeat the poop jokes. You're paying money to make me mad. Okay, we did this one too already, but this one's not a repeat. This one is a repeat, not an intentional repeat.
Oh, okay. All right.
Jesus
awesome.
Christ. I got
now you can
go. Yeah, I gotta go. Yeah. I gotta go. I got a dinner to attend. But thank you for nothing, you useless creatures in the super chat. I think probably about, what would you say, 85% of those, guesstimating, were puns.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the channel made about $500 tonight on poop puns alone.
Yes, I agree. I hope you're happy, all of you. I hope you got what you wanted. I'm irritated. I'm hangry too. But I do love being on SkepTalk. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I hope the show was fun. Since I had to go through it.
I promise I won't bring my dad jokes. Just, do another show with me at some point in the future.
Truly, Don. If you bring them, I will leave. So don't
just fucking hang up on me. I don't blame you.
I'm obligated to read the super chats, but the puns in the show is now a violation of my contract that I'm going to renegotiate with Jim. Oh, he froze. Oh, you froze. But no, I didn't.
Yeah, I did for a second. All right. Well, that's going to be it for our show tonight. Thank you so much to all the mods in the chat there, helping us moderate there. Thank you so much to Marijn for producing. And I believe it was Stephanie on the phones tonight, call screening, everything like that. Thank you so much, everybody, for making this show as awesome as it always is. And I guess we will see you heathens tomorrow for Chewed Gum. Yeah.